Oh, okay.
Morning, colleagues. Morning. Just a quick announcement. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Mokanyama, took a short lift somewhere, so we're just expecting him imminently. But I'll give him about 5 minutes. But let's just say we'll start in 5 minutes, and when he arrives, we'll receive him. Does that sound clear, Harry? Sounds like I'm distorted. Is that better? Sounds like I'm a ninja turtle, which I am after hours anyway. So just relax, and 5 minutes, I should get you off the ground. All protocols observed. And because we have a tight program and I can't afford to overrun in any way whatsoever. I'll be back with you shortly.
This 1, 2. Just a message to our people on Zoom and YouTube. Note that we're just waiting for the keynote speaker. As soon as the person has arrived, the session will start. Thank you very much.
See now, write it down, if you will mix, look at it, possible of the program, and what is the page. Or that one.
Test. Good morning, colleagues. If we could settle down. It turns out that we've discovered another hotel and conference center called Lakeside. How's that for us? So some of our delegates and attendees are trying to insist on a conference entrance at the Lakeside Hotel and Conference Center. Nevertheless, we're going to start because, as I said, it's a tight program. Welcome, everybody. Those of you present here, and welcome to the SABOA Strategy Workshop Day 1, our colleagues online. A fabulous turnout. We were oversubscribed again, but I think some people just like to subscribe for attendance and be part of it in spirit rather than show up here. But I think by the time the government delegation in full arrives, we'd have to sit some people in the aisles. But I can confirm that this is perhaps another full house event by the time the day kicks off fully. We had 100 people subscribed for the in-person, and we've got about a 75, 80 turnout online. So just some quick info. I've got 15 minutes to give you the lay of the land and set the scene, and I hope I do that properly. But just to give you context from government, both national, provincial and local governments, we have some fairly good representation here today. DDG Matabata Mokanyama is on his way. He's one of those that chose the alternative venue, but he's making his way, and he may arrive with Chief Director Lesiba Manamela from the NDOT for public transport. We've got other colleagues here from the NTOT, integrated transport and public transport, as well as the Chief Director, Mr. Tenza, who's on his way, but his team is here, Ms. Kotswani and Ms. Mokwene from Integrated Transport Planning. They handle the alternative energy sector and research into electric vehicles. Then we've got with us Director in the Department of Equity within the Department of Labor, Mrs. Nswaki Mamashela, sitting with us. You're welcome, ma'am, with your team. Also with her, Deputy Director, Mr. Masilo Lefika, and Mr. Mohale from the team. So thank you all from government for making time and effort to join us today for the strategy discussions. Colleagues, as I've said, pretty tight program, so I don't do much of the talking today, thankfully. I think you're tired of my voice for 2022. I dominated the airwaves, the platform, the podium, so we've got an exciting panel today. There's a slight change, again, due to unforeseen travel programs and imposition by bosses in government. Colonel Boysons was to join us in the second part of the program this afternoon. The SAP's strategy discussion got scheduled with our strategy discussion. How's that for a clash? But he's kindly agreed that he would do his presentation tomorrow morning. So we've adjusted the program. The SAP's part of the engagement towards violence avoidance and all the attacks and intimidation the industry is facing will kick off with tomorrow morning and then into the program. But for the rest, you've got on your table and up on the screen the updated program. I just need you to be appreciative, both online and here present, of the time constraints. I was pretty deliberate in compacting the program up front because I know we will overrun. So not all of us here for the social networking at the end of the day. So that's my reserve in the bank to get us to the end of the day. And when we get to it, on your tables in front of you, if you want to post questions and any comments for the various panelists and for the content, please do use that. So for ease of facilitation and time, we can get the process going. And then online colleagues, you will always, like in our interactions with the Transport Forum, post your comments and questions on the chat group. Given the tight program, I always need assistance. And today I've got assistance in the form of a facilitator. Mr. Gerard Kotsia is going to keep us grounded through the process. Not so much today. Today he's an attentive listener. Tomorrow he comes to the fore, or tail end of today, he will make his grand entrance and through the Q&A as well. So brief introduction of Gerard. He's a leadership and management developer, an executive coach and an entrepreneur. He's also the owner and managing director of DABA Enterprises. His biggest passion is to help people and companies discover their purpose in life. His company, DABA Enterprises, was established with the vision of using coaching, mentoring as a tool to assist clients, individuals, and teams to both improve their company as well as their personal lives. Gerard believes that when one works and contributes to society from an understanding of what you have been born to do and achieve during your life, your work then becomes meaningful, so that one cannot be but successful whilst productively enjoying what you do. Welcome, Gerard. And he's also a qualified metallurgical engineer out of Tux with a master's degree in business leadership through UNISA. having spent 35 years in the corporate world leading local and international companies before deciding to share his knowledge and experience with corporate and entrepreneurial businesses. He has started 3 new businesses with partners, and they are primarily in the renewable and energy and manufacturing industries, which are the core competencies. He's also qualified himself as a life coach and a professional business coach to develop business leaders professionally as well as on a personal level. And he's passionate about transforming companies to leave legacies. As a devoted family man, he's married, 5 children and 18 grandchildren. Does it qualify you for government, presidency? He believes that happy and healthy marriages produce happy children and form the key to healthy societies. So welcome, Gerard. I think we're looking forward to your interaction and keeping us knitted through, especially for tomorrow, and then post-process from a report of the strategic outcomes. So colleagues, yeah, I'm almost done, but just still some important people that I need to introduce to you right now. I think you've noticed in past interactions and online, we've never had the opportunity to have the bulk of our SABOA Executive Committee and our SABOA National Council in the same place at the same time. And this event provides us with that opportunity. So let me give you some face-to-face introduction of our team and my 250 bosses. So, President, Mr. KV Murugan, he also goes by the name of Terry. He's right up here. Vice President, Ms. Imogene Mwango. And then in terms of the balance of SABOA executive members, Mr. Francois Meyer. Mr. Thijs Haynes. Mr. Suvir Maharaj. Ms. Matlakala Motlaong. Mr. Nazim Dolly. And last up on the EXCO committee, Mr. Eric Mochwani. So that's the SABOA Executive Committee that kind of primarily drives the functioning and operationalization of SABOA and the Secretariat as an association. We've also got the National Council, which is the highest decision-making body. Some of the members are not present, but those present today, again, in no particular order, Mr. Daniel Sambo. Daniel represents the Mpumalanga region. Ms. Kathy Bell is an associate representative. That's Kathy down in the end. Mr. Vidor Mangaru. There we have Vidor. Mr. Elias Chongo. Right up here. And I'm not sure if Mr. Khare is around. There was, and then the rest of the members are joining us online. So thank you, council members, Nikas, Roberts, Kotso Mochwaneng, Mr. Ramate, Victor Baepani, Mr. Malabela, and Mr. Pakadi are all online. You're welcome. And yeah, so let's get some of the protocols, safety and security. So apologies up front. Load shedding affects more than just traffic and our internet connectivity. I believe that the building's air condition bombed out yesterday late with one session of the load shedding process. So we've organized some additional fans to come through and they'll come through shortly, but we're going to have to make the best of the process, slightly out of our control. So the exit is the same as you came in as the entrance. In the event of a sudden drop in cabin pressure, so I'm getting ahead of myself. I can only start talking about that after 1 May when I leave SABOA as part of that portfolio. But seriously, that's the exit. The ablutions are out the door to the right. and a right again. And then tea and coffee served outside. And when lunch is ready, we'll guide you towards that process. So, yep. Now, onto the task at hand. Colleagues, I think through last year and the last 3 years, you've heard from me, you've heard from SABOA about all the issues at play within the industry. Specifically, the industry is grappling for decades now with issues around policy and legislative uncertainty. We're sitting at a juncture again, where at 31st of March, most, if not the larger percentage of all PTOG contracts come to an end, and there's still no certainty. So we are most likely facing another round of extensions and letters of contract extensions with indefinite periods or shortened periods. That's but one. In a broader context, this uncertainty has massively impeded transformation of the industry and transition of the industry. And with that, it has impeded growth and development of our public transport network. It's encouraging to note we have a new DG, Advocate Mawela, and I was hoping that when the DDG comes through, you'll take back our best wishes. For the industry, take note, together with our friends at the RFA, we're going to try and host a business breakfast to welcome the new DG. And if the new minister is announced by then, we will do so. Let me pause right here to welcome Mr. Mokonyama.
Oh, yes.
Greetings. Great to have you. Compliments. Yes. President Terry. You're most welcome. So we did a fabulous introduction of you in your absence, so we could speak about you when you're not around. Coming back to the potential hosting of a business breakfast. So you're welcome as partners for sponsorship opportunities and co-hosting. Please contact the office and we'll give you more detail in that regard. So as soon as the new minister is also announced, maybe Gavin and I can put something together with the teams. And Mr. Kelly is not going to let me live this down. My apologies to my counterparts from the RFA. And you sit in the back and blend, I tend to forget about the opposition. You're most welcome, Gavin and Kevin. I didn't mention you by name, but welcome to the RFA as well to this. So 2022 was dominated for all the wrong reasons by legal and contractual issues. Then the macroeconomic conditions putting severe strain on us as an industry, as fuel prices went to record levels. And the industry faced unprecedented levels of attacks and damages, and coupled with that, widespread instances of intimidation and disruptions. That was 2022. Take a deep breath, because after saying best wishes for 2023, it's more of the same. Okay, those issues still linger. They linger against other current critical issues that are affecting the industry. So we shaped the program essentially around the core issues that we're grappling with. And on day one, we've created an environment to stimulate your thought process, to stimulate the discussions ahead of the debate tomorrow. Thus, we've invited expert commentators on these issues. And I will introduce each of the speakers ahead of their slot and their speaking. But up front, let me again thank all of you for availing yourself to be part of this process and committing as presenters and panelists. We have Christelle from Standard Bank and Eleanor from Project Rainbow will do online presentations. Outside of that, everybody is present. After our speakers have given us their views and comments, then we will engage in the robust debate on day two tomorrow as to the core strategy that we need to set for the association to take forward and for us to implement as a team on behalf of the industry. Welcome to the SABOA Strategy Workshop. We kick off with an opening address from the President, Mr. KV Murugan, also known as Terry.
Greetings all. Good morning, Sanbonani, Koyamora, protocols for all the other 9 languages. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this critical event hosted and put together by our SABOA secretary team. A special welcome to the DGG, Mr. Mokanyama from the NDOT. It's a pleasure seeing you again. It's been a while. In the last video was when you were in KZN. Mr. Mokanyama, sir, you and your team at the NDOT are probably our most critical stakeholders. We look forward to your input and sharing of information, as well as your views on the various topics that we will be discussing. May this be the first of our resurrection and continue to be an open relationship towards the common vision of transporting our industry. We also welcome the Director of Employment Equity, Mrs. Mamashela, and the Deputy Director, Mr. Lefeka, together with their team. Colleagues, employment equity and the sector targets have placed some erroneous obligations on us as an industry. And I dare say that we felt like being bullied in a way, as we have not had, or we have had very little input in the setting of targets. This is probably going to be a major challenge for the industry and employees for the next 5 years. Another major stress point in the industry is the number of attacks, the levels of intimidation, and the ongoing destruction of assets and infrastructure. This is eroding the capacity of the industry and the ability to sustain an already fragile transport system. I understand that Colonel Boyson is not joining us today and he will be here tomorrow, but we look forward to building on our initial engagement with him from last year's conference. Colleagues, it's also encouraging to see the levels of support for the association and the interest in the industry together with our allied stakeholders, both who are here in full force at the venue and of course the many more online. This just underpins the value that we have brought as an association to the industry, and also the belief that these engagements are important for the future sustainability of our industry. The team have put together a very compact program to stimulate your thinking and views around core issues for discussions. I urge you all to participate freely and contribute to the shaping of the strategic view and views of our industry. With your collective guidance and input, SABOA will be able to take our agenda to the forefront and keep the narrative alive at all applicable forums through engagement and consultation. We're also meeting at a very critical stage when the South African Road Passenger Bargaining Council is entering into wage negotiation for the 2023 and beyond. The first round of consultations have concluded, and it is evident that our social partners are very serious of their demands. Session 2, which starts next week, is going to be very challenging, but we're also hopeful of making progress. To all the speakers, panelists who have availed themselves, your time spent with us will not be in vain. Your collective experience and expertise is exactly what the industry needs, and we will continue to draw from this. To our facilitator, who is making his debut today, welcome, Gerard, and good luck with keeping it together. Fortunately, you have a competent and seasoned pilot in Mr. Governor, but I must record and stress to you, he's not someone that can walk alone. Speaking of Mr. Governor, colleagues, you may have heard by now, and he somewhat alluded to it earlier on, Mr. Governor, who was the face of our industry for the last 3 years, and I can't believe how quickly the 3 years have gone, has signaled his intent to depart from SABOA. I have the unenviable task of hereby officially informing you of the resignation of our SABOA executive manager. Mr. Governor's resignation has been accepted by SABOA's ExCo. Mr. Governor has taken up an offer that will see him commence the official notice and 3 months exit period with effect from 1st February 2023, terminating on 30th April 2023. Whilst I acknowledge that the departure of Mr. Governor will be a setback for the association and the industry, I can state without any doubt that he has executed his responsibilities professionally and at a level that has elevated the profile of SABOA. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all members and allied stakeholders when I say that it was a job well done. Basil has seen us through some very uncertain times, particularly the COVID pandemic, plus bringing us together as an industry at a memorable conference, exhibition, and gala dinner, and over various forums and engagement. Mr. Govinder's departure will be a massive loss to the association and to an extent, the industry. But I assure you, the operations of SABOA and the Secretary will continue uninterrupted as the process of recruiting a replacement is well underway, with a structured plan to ensure a new incumbent is appointed to start 1st April 2023 at the latest. All planning for the conclusion of the 2022-2023 financial year, as well as the upcoming 23 and 24 financial year, are in place. There will be a detailed handover process to be conducted by Mr. Govender. I take this opportunity to place on record on behalf of SABOA, the membership, our allied stakeholders, and the industry at large, our sincere appreciation to Mr. Govinder's diligent and professional representation of the association and the industry over the last 3 years, and wish him well in his new venture. And with that, colleagues and the team, I welcome you to sit back, be attentive to the issues that will be presented and your active participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Praise, for those kind words. Appreciate the endorsement. And from a personal note, I wish you, the team, and the industry all of the best going forward as well. Colleagues, just a reminder again to assist us in the facilitation process. In person here on your desks, on your tables, there are forms available for you to complete and send to us with questions or comments that you would like to pass through. And I think from a time management point of view, we're trying to avoid to take questions from the floor at the time of the Q&A session. So for those online, just please use the chat function and Harry will assist us in collating those questions. And with that, folks, it's time for us to welcome our keynote speaker. Just checking my sound. Keynote speaker, DDG of the NDOT is Mr. Matabata Mokonyama, who will give us the address. A little bit about Mr. Mokonyama. He gave me the unenviable task of picking out from your CV the highlights. I've done my best. With a long career in government and holding many portfolios and positions, Mr. Mokonyama, the current Deputy Director General of Public Transport, National Department of Transport, has been in this capacity from February 2011 to date. And in that period, he's also had some Acting Director General stints or tenures at the NDOT from 1 September 2016 to 30 June 2021 and 1 June 2019 to 30 July 2019. But amongst all of those timeframes, he's held many portfolios and tenures and has been in administrative and head of department capacities. So let's give a warm welcome to the DDG as he steps up. I can assure you that you are expected with such welcome. And you're going to be a person that's popular today. So have you got your big shoulders on? Lots of questions to follow. You're most welcome and thank you.
Should I be scared?
Never. We are friends with a common vision.
I kind of like that. We are friends. It's been a while since I spoke to this collective, but there are many familiar faces. I must assure you, Mr. Governor, that, or I must remind you that I said I've been talking to SABOA for many years. In other years, twice or 3 times per year. And the last time I said, I'll never come to your workshops, conferences, and the like, because I've been saying the same thing. And nothing changes. The day I come, I should bring good news. The sad part is that I don't have good news. Because when I resisted to come and I said, I don't have good news, you insisted that I must come. So I'm here. It's nice to be here. Thank you very much to the facilitator, the host, the leadership of SABOA led by the president, members of SABOA, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I was ambushed. In my language, we use the word ambush. So I was ambushed. So I had very little time to prepare. Fortunately, like you said, some of us have been in the space for a very, very long time. I don't know whether I should guarantee you or promise you that probably the next time around you should insist on your face or on your faces. We've done our part, Prof. We've been in the space for a very long time. I'm an elder now. See, when I stay in Hamashashan, when you get there and they start to give you roles like vote of thanks, you must know you are old. So I'm so honored today to be making an address. I'm used to vote of thanks these days. Look, I did not prepare a speech. I prepared speaking notes because you said this is a workshop. But definitely we will be so happy to receive questions and provide answers where we have. The only thing is that my speaking notes are more in the form of challenges to the industry, more than answers from government. You said we are partners, no? Thank you. I like that because we now want to hear from partners. We've been doing this thing for many years. We don't seem to get it right. There are successes here and there, but mainly challenges. Now, maybe we need to sit back and listen to you in terms of your own expectations from government. We are meeting where the country is facing some serious challenges. I think when I came in, Mr. Governor was talking about them. The president alluded to some of them. We have the energy crisis in the country. We are on stage 4, no? I thought that was a hoax. I thought that somebody said we'll never go to stage 6. But we are on stage 4 and we need to prepare for stage 2 for the next 2 years. But I saw that from social media that we are on stage 5 and we will be on 6 tomorrow morning. Yeah, it's not getting any better. Inflation is high. Stubbornly refuses to go below 6%, the targeted 6%. I think it's 7.4 now. Interest rates keep on going up. The Lesotho keeps on increasing the interest rate. And if, like somebody said, we thought 2022 was bad, we need to tighten the belts. It does not look like we will be out of these challenges soon. Good luck to the bargaining council chamber meetings. Good luck. the biggest problem is when ordinary people are squeezed, they turn to you and demand more in terms of wages. That's the biggest challenge. That's the biggest problem. Fuel has just been increased last night. We don't know where it will end. Some people are busy fighting one another, causing us all sorts of problems in terms of fuel or oil. We hope that that war can just go so that the oil prices can stabilize, so that we get more certainty in terms of fuel prices. But simply put, providers like of services like yourselves are squeezed, and in turn, the squeeze is likely to be transferred to the users. Am I wrong? I'm not blaming you. We are partners. At some stage, we are going to offload this squeeze to the users, unfortunately, partially or wholly. And this is not good news. You're also faced with uncertainties with regard to the contracts. I'm sure if there is one message that you'd want to get out of me is what happens after March 31. Those that are contracted with contracting authorities, provinces. Because I think Lisiba, I'm with Lisiba, by the way. Where is Lisiba? Yeah. Lisiba's extension of 3 years ends on March 31. Hopefully he's working on something. And if you want an answer on that, that's the man. Not me. No, it's true. That's the man. It's not me. Moreover, you've been faced with these short-term extensions for a very long time. And in the process, this impacts negatively on your ability to plan your businesses. You are unable to recapitalize your fleet because you don't know if you will have money to repay the loans after these 3 extensions. But there is some glimmer of hope, and let's just hope this time around things will turn for the better. Yeah, the only problem is that partners take us to court every time we want to take 2 steps forward. We can safely say there are a few provinces that are willing to negotiate. Some have started, some are about to start. And I don't think that they will negotiate 3-year contracts. This will be done in terms of Section 41 of the NLTA. So we're looking at longer term negotiated contracts with some certainty. The bad news is that the fiscus has not been growing up proportionally or the way we want it to be. As such, the majority of those contracting authorities are going to negotiate within more or less the same envelope. Now, I'm scared. I'm a practitioner. I'm an official. I'm scared, not only for yourselves, but in the main, the users, because what this would mean if we were to provide a quality service at those levels of investments, the likelihood is that services will be cut so that we are able to be within budget. We have been talking with government. We've been making a lot of noises. And I'll tell you what I told you the other time, although we've made some strides. We're also not spared as government. The AGs on the province's cases in terms of these perpetual extensions of contracts. Almost all of them have had negative findings by the AG. Indicating that the expenditures should be disclosed as irregular expenditure. We don't have media here, do we? This is an open session or closed? Oh, it's very open. Okay. I received an email that said we should submit our speaking notes, documents, presentations, and stuff. For the first time in my life, in my 39 years of work life, the email said, if there are things that you don't want them to go to public, don't submit. So I didn't submit because I wanted to talk to you, just so that we don't get misquoted out there. What I wanted to say is that there's a difference between legal judgments through law as we know it in legal processes and the accounting treatment of government's finances. Maybe I should just put it clear. The AG says the expenditure is irregular, but the AG will never say the expenditure is illegal. So there's a difference between illegal and irregular, okay? So that's some little bit of comfort on our side as auditees. But in the midst of all of this, the system remains untransformed. I'm happy you're going to talk about equity. The system remains untransformed for almost 28 years into democracy. And it's not your fault. The majority of you know my views around BRT systems. I think the BRT solution has failed dismally in the country. We are to blame as government because we proposed it. It's not going according to plan. 10 years later, 10, 12 years later, we started just before 2010. Close to 60 billion rand spent. We only have about 250 kilometers of trunks, around 1,000 kilometers of feeder routes, and about 850 or so, just close to 1,000 buses to brag about. That's where I pitched my discussion in terms of policy context. Prof, just so that I reminded them that I was once your student. And I read quite a lot of your journals. They helped me to be where I am today. You said in public transport policy implementation in South Africa, Quo Vadis. You remember that paper? You said that we have solid policies. The problem is implementation. I agree, but I think we need to dig deeper, Prof. We need to dig deeper. These policies that are solid, these policies that we always pride ourselves about and say are solid. Don't worry, the speech is very short. It's speaking notes, it's not a speech. Why are they not implemented? And Prof goes and gives quite a number of analysis in terms of that. But I think my own take, Prof, we then need to press a reset button or just move 2 steps backwards a little bit. Maybe those policies are unimplementable. They are good, but they are just not so right in terms of our own situations, the South African situation. That could be one of the reasons. I'm not saying is the only reason. That could be one of the reasons. But also, I think we need to have some sharp minds, Prof. I said I'm an elder. Very soon, don't be deceived by this baby face. Very soon I'll be going on pension. The one thing that I wish I could leave behind, because I could not implement the policies, in particular the 1996 white paper, is probably to interrogate these reasons why these policies are not being implemented. I've got young men and women in the branch, in the departments, some of them with 3, 4 degrees, 2 senior degrees, and so on and so on. They just don't seem to get this thing right. I said to you today, I don't have answers. I have challenges and questions. Probably we need to hear from those that are affected by these policies. What is it that this government can do? One of the things I think, Prof, why don't we have like pragmatic approach to policies? Why do we believe that policies are so cast in stone that we need to follow them to the latter? What happened to differentiated approaches? Where I come from Hamashashan in Limpopo. I don't know if you know Hamashashan. Those people don't need your low-floor buses with level boarding and those kind of things. They need transport to take them from Hamashashane to Polokwane to go and look for work or to go and work in the city of Polokwane. Why are we so obsessed with one size fits all? I said to Lisiba when, I just hope the taxi people are not here in numbers. I can handle about 10, not more. I said to Lisiba, if people like taxis and they use taxis and the taxis are not subsidized, why do you think that there should be some dedicated subsidy for taxis? I'm not saying they are affordable. Maybe they don't have a choice, but I'm just saying there are certain routes where you really do not necessarily need to subsidize. We are busy with the subsidy policy. By the way, I think before June, it would have been approved by cabinet. It is in its final stages. But I read that policy. I went through the 2021 reviewed transport policy. They still talk around the same. It's the same language that was spoken by the 1996 one paper. Does the National White Paper on Transport Policy prove adequate certainty to implementing agents? That's the first question. Where are the policy gaps, if there are any? But importantly, do we have capacity to implement those policies? I did not provide answers for these questions. I said earlier on, we need some sharp minds that need to go and do a thorough analysis on this one. The jury's out there. Some of the initiatives and way forward, as I conclude, I've indicated that we are finalizing the subsidy policy, where we've never hidden the fact that there is rationale for subsidizing public transport because it's not affordable. And I can indicate here and now that the focus is more on users to afford the cost of transport than on anyone else. Of course, you benefit in the process, yes. So the targeting has not changed. We're still targeting the user to make sure that they're able to afford transport. Even more importantly, so in this era where we have these challenges, where the disposable income has shrunk. The other one thing that we we're doing, I've mentioned it just in passing again. It is encouraging that a number of provinces, I don't know, it's because they're pushed by the AG or it is the right time, they are now going to negotiate. I'm now no longer saying they're willing to negotiate. They are going to negotiate number of contracts. Having been in the space for a very long time, I think, and having had sight of some of the draft contract documents, tender documents, I'm worried where we were supposed to unbundle so that we allow your smaller bus operators, your emerging bus operators. There seems to be rebundling or consolidation of some of the routes. Contracts have been decreased from probably 11 and then clubbed together into 3 or 4. The challenge is that the entry barrier is now again being set too high. I think they don't have any other choices, contracting authorities in the main, because of the cost issue. But definitely, this is an opportunity if you are serious about equity, where you need to come to the party and negotiate in good faith. And get some of those people with 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 buses to come into the space to assist you. Because 41 requires us to do so. We will, as I conclude, pronounce in terms of the gap. One, we know the negotiations are not going to be easy. I heard one province saying that they can start in January and finish by March. I said, good luck. I don't think it is possible. We will, and I committed to Lisiva, that will therefore pronounce very soon in terms of how we deal with the gap, whilst contracting authorities are negotiating, but also while others are preparing to negotiate. So come come April 1, there will be services, and probably without really promising you, you will still be involved. I'd like to wish you a successful workshop in the next coming days. As you deliberate, deal with some of the challenges that I did not provide any solutions to, because I think we now want to hear from those that are impacted by the policies that we develop. I thank you.
Thank you, DDG. I think you've set yourself up nicely. We look forward to that pronouncement in due course with bated breath, but I am sure the team are going to be looking forward to engaging with you. You are staying with us, right? Thank you again, DDG. Apologies, Mr. Manamela, my brother from another department. I didn't know you were in the house, but you've been made the most important person by decree of DDG. So I hope you came with that heavy padding and the bulletproof vest. Okay. Moving along, colleagues, I'm pretty sure that
By the minister, hence we are in a rush. I apologize upfront. We would love to stay and actually engage you this afternoon. However, I thought I should still stay a bit and try and get out of here the latest by 12, if not 12:05. Otherwise, we are going to miss our flight to Quebec. And the flights are few. I heard in the earlier on, President, you said you are being bulldozed or being bullied into sector targets for the transport sector. We are not bullying, we are consulting. As government, and my DDG will tell you, we consult because the implementers are on the other side. We do policy, but the implementers are you. You are the implementers. So if there are any challenges, then we can engage on those challenges. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to touch briefly on why we are doing the targets. You'll have to help me now to move the slides. If we all remember that since 1998, when the Employment Equity Act was introduced, it was only amended once in 2013. However, nothing was done in relation to the regulation of employment equity targets. Employers set their own employment equity targets after consulting with their own employees. And we should all agree, self-regulation didn't work. 28 years into democracy, 25 years of employment equity, we have not moved to actually address the imbalances of the past. So in 2017, 2018, we introduced amendments to the Employment Equity Act. These are the second amendments that we are talking about. The first was in 2013, and the ones that we are dealing with now, which introduces sector targets, were introduced in 2018. And the main objective of these amendments is to reduce the regulatory burden on small employers. I think in your sector also, some of your members are very small. They employ between 1 and 49 employees. And we are saying, if we employ less than 50 employees, when these amendments are signed into law by the president, then you don't have to worry about doing the plans, consulting, doing the analysis, which is chapter 3, dealing with affirmative action. But you still have to comply with the elimination of unfair discrimination on any of the prohibited grounds, as covered by chapter 2 of the Employment Equity Act. I know in the media, people don't tell you about this part, that there is government is taking the issue of creating an conducive environment for business very serious. We are requested by cabinet that we need to look at the flexibility around our laws and regulations so that we create a conducive environment and allow small business to grow so that they can actually create jobs, because we need jobs in South Africa. This is the first intention why we are actually alleviating or reducing the regulatory burden. Good or so, we've been criticized by a number of people that the minute you exclude the small business from affirmative action, then it's a big problem. We believe that they will grow. If you allow them space to breathe and actually grow their businesses and sustain their businesses, they will eventually meet the 50 mark in terms of employing the employees and then creating jobs. And then they will be required to comply with section chapter 3 of the Act. The other issue that I know, Mr. Governor, that you are all interested in is the fact that the amendments that are before the president currently, they are actually empowering the Minister of Employment and Labor to regulate sector-specific EE targets. And there is a reason, we all agree here. We have not moved in transforming our sectors or the labor market. 25 years of employment equity. The other third area that we're focusing on is to make sure that those that comply must be incentivized by government. They must get preference when they want to do business with government. So we're asking the president to help us promulgate section 53, which has always been in the law, but was never promulgated, so that we issue certificate of compliance. Everybody has competed for tenders or state contracts, although they were not complying and not interested in transforming their own organizations. The next slide, if we move to the next slide, you'll see that as much as we are trying to accommodate small employers, for small employers, they have criteria to access the certificate of compliance. Everybody must get a certificate of compliance to do business with the government. And we're saying if we employ less than 50 employees, you'll have to actually comply with 2 areas of the law. You must pay the national minimum wage, or you should have been granted an exemption by the Department of Employment and Labor not to pay the minimum wage. The second issue is that you should not have any CCMA or a labor court order against you for unfair discrimination for the previous 12 months. And then you get your certificate and you can tender for anything that you want to do with the government. But if you employ 50 and more, then the criteria is steep, very steep. You must submit your e-report annually. You must comply with your annual EE targets towards reaching the 5-year sector target. You must pay the minimum wage. You must not have an adverse CCMA award for unfair discrimination or a labor court order or a labor appeal court or the constitutional court judgment against you for unfair discrimination. We all know unfair discrimination is unwelcome, it's unpalatable, and is also protected by Section 9 of the Constitution. But what also they are not telling you in the media is that if you don't meet the annual targets that you are going to set yourself, you see, we have not taken away the full self-regulation. We are saying the minister will give you a 5-year target to work towards. But you must set your own annual targets to get to the 5-year sector target. So you still have flexibility built in. The second flexibility that we have built in is that for whatever reason, and you are unable to reach your annual target that you have set yourself, then you have justifiable reasons to explain why you were unable to reach your own annual target. We all know the previous speaker and also the DDG said times are tough. Economically, the energy crisis that we are faced with. We all know that as we are faced with economic crisis, like we don't have enough energy, people are not working, people are not using your buses, and they are not, you are not getting any revenue for sustainability of your business. You will not be able to recruit people. And we are saying you can raise insufficient recruitment opportunities as a justifiable reason. The fact that your business cannot accommodate more people, you are not even promoting people. At times, because of skills that you require, you may not necessarily get a suitably qualified person from the target group that you are looking at. And if you have a CCMA or a court order not to appoint or promote anyone, that is a justifiable reason. You may not reach your target. Again, we know business changes every day. You transfer the business, you are being acquired by other businesses, you merge, you know the environment of your own businesses. And again, we say at times, we may not grow the economy the way we thought it will grow. And we may get some pandemics like COVID, and it affects everyone. We shut down, therefore you will not be able to reach your own targets. And we are saying flexibility is there. Don't be scared when people say you are not going to be able to do business with the government if you don't get certificate of compliance, if you miss your annual targets. They must tell you there is flexibility there already built. These are not quotas. These are targets. And people go around saying that we are setting quotas for business, we are making it difficult for investors to come here. It's not true. I met a number of companies when we were doing DG reviews. And one of the companies in the sugar industry, actually, one of the CEOs laughed at us and said, you still come here and tell me I'm not complying. Whereas when I go up Africa, they give me a target that I need to comply with. And I have no choice to take it in terms of employing their own people. If I want to sell my sugar in Mali, up Africa, 60% of my senior management and top management must be people from the country where I want to sell sugar. And in South Africa, you are very nice. You're still asking me to consider the demographics of the country to comply with the law. And I still believe that we are very nice as government. Very nice. Because we still consult. In other countries where you do business, they don't consult. They give you a quota, then it's not flexible. But in South Africa, we run to the courts and say, you are giving us quotas. But when we are saying we have already built the flexibility in the law. Actually, if you actually implement the law, you are not gonna stay without accessing state contracts. Because if you have justifiable reasons why you can't meet your own targets due to different economic circumstances, we'll have to understand. But remember, we'll have to verify that indeed your justifiable reason is indeed justifiable. Otherwise, we are going to withdraw the certificate of compliance. The minister has powers to withdraw that. I thought in closing, I should quickly show you what we have discussed with the transport sector. I must say, Mr. Governor, I'm disappointed that SABOA has never submitted any proposals. We've been engaging with 18 sectors, and when we got to transport, there is only the Road Freight Association that actually gave us something to work with. But I thought I should just highlight what we are proposing for your sector. Remember, you still have another round to actually give inputs when the minister publishes these proposals for public comments for 30 days. So the door is not closed. But our final proposal is that you must have 50% of Black representation in top management. And you must check it against where you were in terms of the reports that you submitted in 2021. And we're saying out of the 50% Black people at top management, 30% must be male and 20% must be female. But then it must be proportionally distributed in accordance with the demographics of Africans, colors, and Indians. And we are saying, if you look at the bottom there, the white population is already overrepresented far above their economically active population demographics. They are sitting at 57.7% in 2021 when you submitted your report. We are busy analyzing your 2022 report. They may have grown from where they are. They are almost 60% and followed by the Indian population group. And the focus is then to help the colored and the African population groups to actually reach their equitable representation at top management in the transport sector. Quickly, when we go to senior management, you'll see that what the Road Freight Association said when they submitted their submission in 26 March 2021, they were happy that we should go ahead with the 60%. But we understood, because when we analyzed your reports, you were already sitting at 49.7% representation as senior management for Black representation. But you should check the red areas at the bottom row shows which population groups are underrepresented, which is, of course, Africans are lagging behind at senior management like they did when I showed you the top management, and the colored females. But the white group and the Indian group, they are all way above their demographics. They are overrepresented. It's only when you look now at professionally qualified that the picture is a little bit better, but still the Africans and the colored females are lagging behind. And we are saying we are proposing 75%, 48% male and 27% female. But this will be over 5 years. And it will differ from one company to another. And at skilled level, again, the picture is different there a little bit. The lower you go in organizations, it's not only unique in the transport sector. Across all 18 economic sectors, you'll find that the lower you go, skilled, technical, semi-skilled, and unskilled level, it becomes very dark. That's where the Africans and the colored populations are sitting in most organizations. And we are saying 28 years of democracy, 25 years of employment equity, we are still lagging behind. And you'll see that in the last slide, you are doing a little bit better compared to other sectors when coming to people with disabilities. You are sitting at 1.5% in 2021, and we are saying in 5 years' time, push it to 2%. I think we are being realistic. Other sectors are below 1%, and you are very close to 2%. And I think we are being very modest when coming to a sector. And we are saying these are minimum targets. Therefore, you can do better than this and be good employers in the transport sector. And the bill was passed by Parliament last year, May 2022, and we are still waiting for the president to sign it into law. And as soon as it's signed into law, then we'll actually publish the sector targets for public comment for 30 days. And you have an opportunity to give your written inputs when we publish it for 30 days. But if the bill is signed into law later than May 2023, it means then the status quo will remain, because you wouldn't have enough opportunity to review your own plans and align it to the 5-year sector target. We may start implementing the sector target in 2024 going forward. But if it's signed next week, then we're gonna publish the sector targets. You start working on reviewing your EU plans, aligning them to your own sector targets, and starting to do your own annual targets, so that when you submit the report in September, between September and January 2024, is based on the new plan. So we are all starting on a clean slate when the minister regulates the targets. But I must mention, you still have to plan for a semi-skilled and unskilled level, so that we want those people that are sitting there, which is majority Black, they must move up the echelons in your own organizations. On that note, thank you very much for your time and for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
I think we've got 2 questions that we've received. I'm not sure, Harry, if there's anything online. But I just realized with friends like the RFA, who needs enemies? Mr. Kelly, this is your doing. Every target up there says RFA target and has become a transport sector target, but we'll forgive you. Madam, I think if you can answer one question before you go, I think it's critical. I think it's over encompassing all of the issues. The targets you put up are primarily referenced as submission from the RFA, which is great because as counterparts have made submissions, but you seem to have adopted a subsector target as a transport sector target. So there's specifically no interface from the public transport sector, and I'm not sure whether aviation, maritime, which will fall under the transport sector, have had. So we certainly look forward to the Gazette from which we will contribute. But you've answered one of the questions that was asked. What inputs have been received from our sector in response to that? You kind of answered it, that we've not made a submission because I think there was a gap in the process that didn't allow for us or fell through the cracks. What is the status, specifically, what is the status of the legislative amendments to the EEA? And flowing to that, if you may comment on the proposed amendments do not carry constitutional muster, and in the opinion of the person submitting the question, and is open to be challenged. And you said avoid legal processes at all costs. So what steps have you taken to prepare or avert a potential legal challenge? Thank you, ma'am. Yes, you may.
I think I've explained that at the moment, until the amendment bill is signed into law by the president, we are not going to go ahead and implement the sector targets. Remember, section 15, capital A in the amendment bill is the one that empowers the minister to regulate sector EE targets. So at the moment, the status quo remains. You follow the Employment Equity Amendment Act of 2013 together with the Employment Equity Act of 1998. It's self-regulation. We would have loved that the president signs this into law as quickly as possible. The other issue is that I've proven to you, our bill went through NETLAC, it went through the public commentary, it went through Parliament, and there are legal people in Parliament. And due to the flexibility built, I've already alluded to the flexibility built into the sector target. Justifiable reasons, you have power to regulate your own annual targets. We believe that if you think the targets, the sector targets are quotas and are unconstitutional, we are saying you can go to the Constitutional Court. We believe that we have built the flexibility that is required, and it was agreed with your own representatives of organized business in NETLAC. They went again to Parliament, and the lawyers in government have actually gone through this. And we also had the legal drafter from private sector testing the constitutionality of this sector targets, and it has passed the muster. But if you still want to actually challenge it, remember, we can't stop legal challenges because we must all respect the judgments that come out of the courts. If we are told by the Constitutional Court that it's unconstitutional to regulate the sector targets, which are not new things. EE targets have always been there. It's just that self-regulation has been abused by people that needs to implement the law. Hence, we ended up where government had to come up with mechanisms to expedite transformation, the economic transformation of our country. It's only in South Africa that the labor market is skewed. It's not reflecting the demographics of the country. In other countries, you go to America, to Canada, they have employment equity in Canada as well, and the UK, but they are dealing with the minority. In South Africa, we're dealing with the majority because the labor market looks different from what is supposed to be reflecting. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Cheers to the department. My mother taught me never to argue with a woman when she says thank you, goodbye. Colleagues, as you would have seen, that's a time constraint, but I think you'd appreciate that this is probably one of the other challenges outside of funding that significantly affects transformation and transition in this industry. There's no doubt there's commitment. Everybody wants to commit to proper demographic representation and localized equity targets, but there's a lot of work to be done. So you heard it from the horse's mouth. There will be a gazette. I suppose if there's a New Year wish, collectively, can we say, President, do not sign it before May 2023. That should be our wish. Okay, so we get more breathing space. But please be aware, because I think at an individual entity level, that's where you are directly affected. But again, I challenge you because I've always said when SABOA requests information, it is not forthcoming. So I cannot help you and we cannot help you if you do not help us help you. Okay. So we just a reminder again, if you've got questions, just filter them through the side of the table, and Rika is standing by to come and collate it. We on to the next presentation. Colleagues, as you're aware, if you didn't, that SABOA is an NPO association representing the bus and coach industry. Like just about all the entities, and yourselves included, we have been impacted by not only the pandemic, the macroeconomic conditions, the prevailing conditions, and we acknowledge the need for us as an industry association to adapt for ongoing sustainability. So here to give us some insights into potential options, some advice for us as an association in trying times, and together with some other sage advice is Mr. Peter Olliott. Peter Olliott is the CEO of Indwe and a director, and also the former president and vice president of the FIA. Peter, over to you. Thanks and welcome. Yep, Harry will set you up.
Thanks. Just before I get started, the one benefit of sitting in and listening to all the presentations is I will be consistent in that I'll only raise questions and I won't give any answers. Okay, thank you. So let's see. I'll just jumping around. I'll try and get back to where I should be. Okay, so this is basically the introduction is who I am. Director of the Insurance Institute of South Africa, which is also a professional body, but an association. And then the Financial Intermediaries Association of Southern Africa. And I'm also an associate member of the Institute of Risk Management, also an association. So hopefully with my involvement in many associations, I'll be able to share some of the issues we faced in these associations, as I'm sure you do. So what are the issues facing membership organizations? Well, first of all is the concept of membership. For as long as associations have been born, for 100 years, it's been down to the membership fee of belonging to an association. One of the biggest associations currently in the world is called Facebook. It has about 1 billion users, and it's a big association. The membership fee is nothing. Sorry, keep moving away from this. I'm used to walking around, and this microphone's a bit big to walk around, so I'll stand still. At the other part of it, and we saw that with declining economic conditions in South Africa, is the more, and it's almost like a contradictory effect. So the tougher the economy becomes, the more the members need the association. But the more they need the association, the more difficult it is to come up with the contributions to fund the association. I mean, the associations have incredibly important work. So in the transport sector or the bus and coach sector, you guys engaging with Department of Transport. Financial Intermediaries Association, our sort of channel to the top, and I'll start from the top, is Department of Finance, the Treasury, then the Reserve Bank, and the financial sector, Conduct Authority, and then we also deal with other departments, financial sector, Transformation Council, and those are the stakeholders we must engage with to ensure the future of independent intermediaries. But it's not only from a regulatory or government structure where these pressures come from. The one thing is, for those of you, and I don't want to be rude, so I'm just saying there doesn't appear to be a lot of young people here. That's not to say you guys are old, but it's just that the world has changed. So for you who joined SABOA 20, 30 years ago, it was a different economy. Forget South Africa. We know South Africa was different, but the world was different. And what's happened is, as associations have developed, the world around changes, people change. One of the big issues of associations, and we found as well, how do we attract young people into the associations? And the reason why that becomes critical is if you don't have young people, you lose your DNA as an association. So everything that you're striving for, when the youngsters finally decide, well, okay, I'll join this old person's club, there's no DNA. So we've got to make it exciting for young people in the industry to get involved and to learn what the issues are facing the association. Okay, so you have a membership base, and I'm not sure if this is true of SABOA, so if it isn't, I do apologize. But what we find in our industry is, as the economy contracts, we have consolidation. The bigger guys buy out the smaller guys and they become bigger. The smaller guys disappear because the cost of membership or participation in the sector becomes prohibitive. And because there's government people here, I won't say anything nasty about regulation. Okay, but we have to admit that in total, we're not a first world country. Okay, we're a mix. First, second, third, fourth, you name it, we've got it in South Africa, and that's why we love it, because it makes us different. But we are sort of, especially in financial services, dictated to by international standards and regulations, and just to play the game becomes prohibitively expensive. So we spend a lot of time as an association trying to level the playing fields, especially for smaller players, so they can get into the sector to become big at some stage. Okay. So what do members want? Okay, so the first thing is, I say, well, don't always ask members what they want because they're not quite sure. It sounds a bit funny, but believe me, you can ask people, well, why should the SABOA exist? To do what? We need to identify the key strategic pillars of existence. So the ultimate goal is the continued sustainability of bus and coach passenger transport sector of the economy. What are the components of the strategic intent? Members. So it's obvious, an association without members doesn't exist. It's like a golf club. You have a golf club with no members, you don't have a golf club. And if you have an association with no members or shrinking members, then your efficacy as an association and your impact starts to shrink. Understand the competitive landscape. So I think it happens to all of us. We're in an association which looks after our particular interest area in an economy, and we tend to see it in isolation of what's happening in the rest of the economy. Well, I think from prior presentations, including the economist from Standard Bank, who has quite an upbeat view of South Africa, a bit more upbeat view than I have, but anyway, it shows that we exist with other sectors of the economy. So if we look at from unemployment to all of those things, it has a rolling impact on everyone's sector, including SABOA. So that's the other part, is what are the competitors and what are they doing? So I'll give you an idea. 100 years ago, railways were like the place to be. Okay, they conquered the world and everyone had a railway, and then good trains, good train services, and then they invented the aeroplane. And that was almost like the end of railroads. They made a comeback 100 years later, but now they're all these Lani things like the blue train and the upmarket things. So they made a comeback, but in a different guise. So what you find in public sector transport, as an example, is that there's been a shift in terms of, do people use your services? Remember, there's also urbanization that's happened. So people have come from the platteland, come into the city because maybe there's better job opportunities. That then changes the need for transport, etc., etc. I don't need to tell you guys, you know your sector. So I'm saying, is the game the same for all members? Are there different members who have different impact on their businesses as members? There's school buses, there's public transport, there's free paying transport, there's bus, luxury bus and coach. Speaking of tourism, I flew down to Cape Town yesterday and I was very pleased. About 70% of the aircraft was full of tourists, overseas tourists. So all these things start to tell me that something's happening, and maybe the good news is lagging what's really happening on the ground. Because when you're in an aircraft and you see 70% of them are foreign, it starts to tell you, and that's not just one flight. I've done about 4 or 5 flights in the last week, and they've all been full, which is another good point as well. And then legislation, regulations. I've named a few pieces of legislation which are applicable to your sector, but the list goes on. And one of the things we did at the FIA, which I'll get to, is how did we address these challenges? So we've got a committee called the Regulatory Committee. It's the biggest committee in the FIA. And in Afrikaans, it's called Regkom. And that actually fits in with a South African saying, Moenie worry nie, alles sal regkom. Okay, and that's what the Regulatory Committee does. We engage with all our stakeholders, and we're not just naysayers. So we don't just fight against everything that government wants to do. Where we agree, we support them and we say so. Where we disagree, we engage and we offer alternatives. And that process has now forced us into a position where when the government wants to make changes in the financial sector, they talk to us. So we've been elevated because of the quality of the submissions we put in. We don't put juniors in our regulatory committee. These are top guys that work for companies. The other thing we did at the FIA, Basil, sorry, I hope I don't give offense to this, was I was the last white male president. We now have a black female president who's far better looking than me. And things have started to happen. So I did all the groundwork, and now that Bootsy's there, the FIA is really gaining ground. So I don't know, SABOA, you can listen. But seriously, from our point of view, what we did was we didn't communicate to our members. We thought we were. We were sending like emails and all sorts of things, and we figured out 2% of our red. So we were patting ourselves on the back, all the good things we'd done, the millions we had saved, and no one knew about it. So technology does play a role in member perceptions. There's also many members who felt that our value proposition hadn't been articulated. So they always remember FIA for our lovely golf days, and where we invite insurers and sponsors to come present and tell us about their products while they sponsor the braai. If that's the only reason for existence, it's a bit difficult. So our focus is on regulation, legislation, and bodies. As I told you, that's our biggest committee. Our focus is on the earning capacity of our members, which is very important, because if our members don't have money, they can't pay our membership fees. Our focus is also on training and informing our members about the future direction of our industry. What we are trying to do is encourage young people, all races, all genders, to enter our industry, because it is an important one for South Africa. And we have far too few Black financial advisors in the game. And the reason for that is it's very difficult to get into the game and costly. So we focus on the future regulations. We also ensure that the sector remains viable. So just to put you into a picture, the direct marketing, direct insurers, direct financial advisors, and they started about 25 years ago. No one took too much notice of them. And slowly they've gained market share, but they're still only at about 25% of the market. 75% of our market is delivered by independent financial advisors. Small entrepreneurs who might employ 5 people or 50 people, just like your bus companies. Okay, it's obviously a complex subject, and as I said, it was made easier by the fact that I could just pose questions without giving answers, because Basil said answers would take up the rest of the day, and that's his forte. So Basil, I believe you are going to be providing answers to all the questions raised by the presenters this morning before you go.
Before I go.
That's it. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, I think that brings us firmly. Thank you, Peter, for that insightful approach towards an association sustainability. I think that brings us to the Q&A section. Harry keeps moving the camera, so I never know where to stand. And we've received the questions up front. So Christelle, I think if Christelle's still online, she's gotten away scot-free. Not a single question for you, Christelle. So thank you very much for your input. And from the financial, I think we're all nervous to ask a financial question at this stage anyways. So DDG, I think you are the most popular person in the house, but by power of authority vested in you, you have deferred that to Mr. Manamela, did you say, right? Or jointly. But let me get there. I think there's one for you, Peter. So let me get that out of the way. And I'll read this. It comes from Carla Janse van Rensburg at Fog Maker SA. I think, Steve, you might want to keep a handle on this as well for your presentation later. As experts in the field of risk, how have you addressed the risk of bus fires? Besides the usual fire extinguisher, we have seen the devastating impacts of losing vehicles. Have you considered issues or technologies such as automatic fire suppression systems to avoid these devastating impacts? And do you see a potential for legislation on this topic? I'm not, is that well positioned with you, Peter? If you may answer it, yeah.
The thing with risk is it's about this wide, and the risk of bus fires can be divided into things that occur naturally when there's an oil leak or a fuel leak, but there's also criminal activities. And it doesn't matter what your fire suppression system's like. If there's criminal activities who want to set your bus on fire, they're going to do that. So what we have to look at is risk information. And we use that quite successfully in the trucking sector, which I'm sure the RFA can talk about. But it becomes about predicting and preventing, because you can't prevent or deal with stuff that you can't predict. And a lot of these things are happening because they organize crime, unfortunately. The days of what we think random events, I don't think hold true for all of us, and we can talk about it. We know that there's organized crime, particularly targeting the bus sector. So I would say risk information is something that should be invested in. And we can use technology for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And for those of you who are not aware, the Global Initiative report, I know we shout it from every rooftop, Kathy and myself. It's available on the SABOA website, the link's there. It gives you some very sobering reflections on organized crime across all of the sectors in South Africa. And there's a specific sector for a specific section on the impact on the transport sector. And if you cannot find it, then just drop us a line and we'll send you the link again. DDG, did you muster up the courage? Are you ready for the hot seat? I've got only like 15 pages of questions, so. So I'm going to create a thread for you, DG, and just kind of I'll pause, but I'm just going to kind of sequence it so that it flows from one to the other. So
Remember,
over
I said I can handle 10 taxi people.
10 taxi people, so I'll bring it down to 10 questions.
Bring them on.
Okay. So we're standing apart so that the two mics don't clash. Yeah.
What I didn't ask was, are we also allowed to ask questions? No, I had a question for Christelle, but related to this alternative energy issue, but
we will
maybe
submit,
if we have time.
yeah, we will
Let's
submit to we will submit it to her because she also had a time constraint in that Standard Bank roadshow. Okay, here goes, Mr. Mokanyama. The Division of Revenue Act is killing the conventional bus industry due to the absence of an escalation formula. When you contrast that with the BRT operations and the funding for BRT, I think everybody in the world wants what the BRT gets in terms of their great escalation formula. Will the department consider bringing something in like an index-based escalation formula in the process of negotiated contracts going forward?
Look, I was one of those when I was still in the province who complained bitterly when the payment mechanism was turned into a grant, because I said at the time it is an easy way to get at the time the DG of transport out of jail and put all the HODs in provinces right at the doorstep of jail. Because you'd recall at the time, it was when our partners took us to court around non-payment. Now, government, in terms of cabin expenditure, decided to then transform it into a grant transfer. So it's basically not DORA. DORA is just a piece of legislation that apportions monies to provinces, municipalities, categorizes what is equitable share and what is a grant. So the issue here, the problem is the grant. And the issue here is not necessarily, if there was money, the very same DORA grant, money in the DORA, would be enough to cover everybody and to cover the escalation. Now, let's come to the issue of the escalation. I want to believe that the escalation affects interim contracts only, because standard contracts have got a different formula, those that are on standard contracts. That's the first part. The second part is that in terms of the interim contracts, there is an escalation formula. Unfortunately, what the poor provinces get is what we all get from government and the National Treasury. Now, if they decide to increase the baseline by 4%, where will the poor guys get more money to go to 8.75 just for 2022 as an example? That is the challenge, and those are the provinces that are entirely dependent on the public transport operations grant. There are provinces that, and PTOC was designed to be a supplementary grant, meaning therefore that whatever shortfall, the provincial treasuries should come to the party to augment what they receive from the national. Unfortunately, we all get this money from the same pot. And there is just so much for everything. Now, my understanding is that And that's why I said the negotiations, those that said that they will take 2 months to negotiate, I wish them luck. It's because when you negotiate everything, and what comes out of the negotiation will be a new contract. So you even negotiate the formulas, the escalation formulas in terms of how they will look like. I want to believe that, and that's why I said what will SABOA will be services, because there's not enough money. So all the issues will have to be put into the contract document 1, and number 2, they will have to be affordable. So it's not that the provinces don't want to give you the 8.75. It's because they, in fact, in 2022, Lisiwa, if I'm not mistaken, the baseline was cut by 0.43. Okay, there's 1 or 2 provinces that are realizing savings, and we're trying to make good that escalation. So, but it's not going to be all the provinces, and it's also not going to be sustainable into the future. Now, the sooner you go into the negotiations, the better, because you are going there, you are going to negotiate everything. What government is interested in will be particularly the empowerment parts. All the other things, the experts in the offices, those that do your invoices, will have to assist you to come up with an acceptable escalation clause. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback, DGG. So just flowing from that, you've answered one of these multi-part questions. Provinces not mandated in supplementing the top-up. You said, to quote you, the poor provinces. Eh?
Look, I say poor provinces not because I'm saying they are poor. I'm saying poor provinces because they're helpless. They also receive that much from the national treasury where we all get money from. But it was designed to be a supplementary. In the case of Gauteng get 100% from PTOC. And I want to believe Gauteng, even on interim contracts, at least for 2022, should be able to honor the escalation clause in the interim contract.
No, 100%, 100%. We're going to be competing by the looks of things with the youths who have a conference upstairs, 1,500 of them. So please do excuse us for the side noise that's coming. Then again, Mr. Mokonyama, what is the government's view on providing fuel-related relief to bus operators? Do you want to take that and then maybe I ask you the next one? There's 2 more after that.
Partly I covered that. In terms of tendered contracts, there shouldn't be issues there. Because we go back 1 month and then we deal with the elasticity in terms of the fuel prices. The challenge will always and has always been with interim contracts because the formula is fixed. And the answer, like everyone, like I said, is in negotiating a better deal for yourselves. That's the first part. The second part is, I wish we had enough money. We could definitely, because we do the analysis, we can do mid-year, sit down around the table and negotiate whether there would be enough for that kind of a relief.
Keeping in line with the negotiations and the contracts, I'm going to link the 2 questions. What is the position of national government on the 30% set aside? Not step aside, set aside. And linked to that, has the national department given the contracting authorities timelines to conclude negotiations of the long-term contract? You've indicated your view that they are a bit over-optimistic to meet 31 March. Outside of that, is there a time frame that has been set for the contracting authorities to meet? Thank you.
No, there's not timelines. It depends in terms of their own state of readiness. Like I said, those that have already informed operators or are about to inform operators have done designs and they've already packaged the services into contracts that can be negotiated. There are those that are still far behind in terms of the planning. Those are the ones that I said, and this is where I said that we are now discussing the gap, which will be taken to MINMEC in terms of how much time do we give those that, in terms of their state of readiness, how much do we give those that are still far behind, and how much do we give those that would have started already? Everybody wants to get into the new system. Like I said, they're feeling the heat in terms of the accounting treatment of the old contracts. Now, the 30% set aside, it's a minimum that is legislated. It's a legislated minimum 30% set aside. When you sit around the table, if I won't be there, but if I was there and I was a contracting authority, I'll definitely ask for more. And then you'll definitely, unfortunately, can't go below 30%. Unfortunately, because that is legislated. It's more like those EU targets that were discussed earlier on. The Competitions Commission is on our case in terms of transformation. They put a very ambitious percentage. You must go and read their report on the market survey on public transport. It was published 2 years ago. They've put a very ambitious percentage that you must reach. So 30%, you can't negotiate it down, unfortunately.
I think that would be the questions. Harry, do you have anything on? Oh, sorry, there was one online question, but I'm not sure that you could take that. DG, 1 second. DDG, just calling it up. So this comes from the operator of the BRT contract in Cape Town, reading verbatim, Mr. DDG. My BRT contract with the city of Cape Town is coming to an end in 2 years, but I've not heard anything from the city. They are awaiting the NDOT extension. What is your take, Mr. DDG?
No, the BRT contracts are with municipalities. They've got very little to do with the NDOT in terms of concurrence on extensions. We have a say on interim contracts because those are the ones that were ceded to provinces. By the way, this issue around negotiations, just so that it is not misconstrued out there. One, it depends on the province state of readiness, but also two, you should know that in terms of the current legislation, the authority to contract is with municipalities. So municipalities should also agree that the province should touch some of the services in their municipal areas.
We got you. The BRT is a municipal function.
No, the BRT is a city issue. The city needs to resolve that. I know a little bit about the Cape Town situation, but I think I'll bore the house with those kind of details.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Colleagues, and thank you for your time. Mr. Manamela got away lightly today, right? So, colleagues, I think, yeah, the program as it stands now says we should be taking a break for lunch. Okay, welcome back, colleagues. I indulged you with some extended time. And that would have included making telephone calls. So can I ask for everybody's attention? Some of the people are still eating, but we're going to proceed onto the second section. And as I said, Colonel Boysons, Harry, will you help me? Everybody back online? Welcome back, colleagues online. Madam VP, can I ask that you get off the phone, please? Thank you. The Colonel will address us first thing tomorrow morning, and then we can continue those issues around the attacks on the industry. Excuse me. By the way, if somebody has picked up a box of Kent Special cigarettes, you're welcome to have them, but just be warned, every second one as a hint of purple haze. So if you start floating, nothing to do with me, okay? Please return to sender. I had to go to the shop in the lunch break. Okay, as a precursor, I think for the next speaker, we spoke early on, the industry has been subjected to ongoing attacks, intimidation, and unnecessary destruction of infrastructure and assets. We're going to give you a little prelude as part of an EXCO deliberation this morning. There will be a collaborative survey of the industry, trying to assess and ascertain the real impact and get some true statistical data with integrity that will shape our discourse on how to frame responses and how to frame interventions. We'll give you more detail through the months of April, but and we'll announce when that survey is going out, but we encourage the industry at large to be participative in that. And yeah, as I said, we will continue to communicate that. The attacks on the industry not only threatens the survival of the industry, the transformation, the transition of the industry, but I think more importantly, the safety and security of operators and ultimately staff and the traveling commuters. Now, when you start touching that arena, you are playing with the viability and people's constitutional right to access of to transport and mobility, as well as safe accessibility. And I think it's one of the core issues that will play out in this year, and we need to deal with it. SAPS is committed to walking the journey with us. The department's left, but I have correspondence a mile high with the department. They are still yet to allocate a resource to us to form that last leg of the tripartite approach to this. We deposited that issue at NEDLAC. It has slid down the agenda on NEDLAC, obviously with other macroeconomic issues taking the forefront. All things transport in general on the NEDLAC forum have slid down the priority list, but we will continue and persevere with that. So against that backdrop, I think, Steve Cornelius, you coming in from a risk and insurance point of view, and with all of that destruction and threat around, the risks are unfortunately elevated. I think you know that from a personal point of view. It's an opportune moment then, as one of the experts in the field of risk, to give us insights into managing and containing. And I think more importantly, what everybody wants to understand, how do you get your best bang for your buck? Because insurance is always deemed to be a grudge purchase. So welcome, Steve Cornelius. A little bit about Steve. With 28 years experience in the short-term insurance industry, Steve plays an integral role in the relationship between SEMA and SABOA. After completing his accounting studies in 1906, is that correct? Excuse the typo. At the University of Pretoria, and then thereafter gaining his honors degree through UNISA, Steve went on to do his articles at PwC in 1910. He filled a short period of his career as a lecturer at the Pretoria Technikon in 1912, and then entered the world of short-term insurance. with a fast-forward trajectory to the 2000s. His focus these days is largely on solutions for transport and logistics sector, and he's also a recognized fellow of the Insurance Institute. When he's not talking insurance, you will find Steve working on his golf swing or tearing down some single track on a mountain bike trail somewhere. Steve is the Senior Account Executive for Logistics at SEMA Risk Solutions. Thank you, Steve. Welcome. Let's hear from you on how to save money but still get ourselves well protected.
For that very flattering introduction. Guys, I'm going to talk about risk and insurance. And I think if we all had to be honest and think of two grudge purchases that we in our personal capacity and in our business capacity have, I'm sure that you're all, 90% of you write down income tax and insurance. I can't think of any two worse grudge purchases other than alimony to my ex-wife that I've had. And if one thinks of income tax, there's two words that we can use: avoidance and evasion. Now, I'm going to ask Basil if he knows which one of those two words are legal: avoidance or evasion. I think he's phoning his lawyer.
Somebody mentioned it. I'm going to phone the boss at home. But the answer to any questions here poses in that regard and to yours, it's, do you want to be married or do you want to be right?
Did you say right or happy?
You can't be both.
Okay, we're digressing, but it was when I was preparing this presentation, and I realized that most of my life I've been involved in either selling insurance or practicing as a tax practitioner. I now come to understand why I've got so few friends and was reasonably unsuccessful in a couple of marriages. So I'm hopefully qualified to talk about this. And it's going to be a short presentation on really just, first of all, looking at the increases in physical and economic risks, then understanding a little bit about how insurance is priced. I don't think everyone understands always how a premium is derived. You go to a broker and you tell him, go and shop the policy, and you come back with a premium, and that's it. I just want to touch on that. And then finally, to end on a positive note, I hope to have some solutions and give you and the listeners out there some food for thought in terms of whether they are correctly structured. So let's get on with it. Okay, the increasing risks, and I mentioned physical and economic. Intimidation and violence. We don't have to think anything further. That I've been involved in probably 10 or 12 cases with existing clients, two of them here listening, attending, where they've incurred severe losses through violence and intimidation. And I think that's on the increase with unemployment. And I was glad to see unemployment is going a little bit better, because I think that's half the cause of this. Worsening road conditions. Our roads are definitely going backwards. And unfortunately, I have to be careful now, because I've got a very dear friend, Gavin Kelly from the Road Freight Association, who's also one of our insurance partners. And I do blame the amount of trucks that are on the road, but I'm sure Gavin will explain why there's so many trucks on the road. But the roads are deteriorating, and that is leading to more risks on the part of the bus operators. Increased cost of repairs directly lead to an increase in insurance premiums. And I think we all see the way inflation's going, and labor costs and parts costs, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think that's rocket science. Diminishing profit margins, diesel, insurance premiums, labor costs, everything is going up. And from what I can gather from attending meetings with the regional SABOA guys is that your contribution is not going up. So your profit is going down. And one doesn't have to, again, be all that clever to realize that what happens in that situation, operators will start neglecting their maintenance programs, which are some of their biggest costs. I'm not saying you do, but I say that is a temptation, and that does lead to additional risks out there. And then socioeconomic unrest, I don't know if you've heard, but we all lived through the last Durban violence, and apparently on the 20th of March, there's talk of another one of these events happening. And my last point goes hand in hand with that socio-economic unrest, SASRIA. SASRIA is a problem at the moment. They don't have money. They are buying time in paying claims. You've got to fight. It's like pulling chickens' teeth to try and get them to pay claims. And I just think that is a risk to bus operators out there. So the climate isn't all that great at the moment. And these are all risks that you have to mitigate, you have to transfer, and how do you do it? Through insurance. Now, some interesting facts. Insurance is, first of all, an extremely expensive finance method. It's insurers aren't there as a charity institution. They need to make money. So theoretically, every claim that they pay, they've got to collect an extra 40% at least. So it's not a very healthy rand swapping exercise. So a point that I'd like to make today is use insurance where it's for covering unpredictable and catastrophic events, where you can possibly handle those risks as an operational item in your business. And I like to use the example of windscreens. That's not unpredictable. You are going to lose a windscreen, and it's not going to close your business down by losing a windscreen. I would suggest that you rather go negotiate with a supplier in terms of pricing and labor and all that, and take that cost of insurance out of your policy and do it yourself. It's windscreen repairs are not meant to be covered by insurance. Although I do know that some buses have hugely expensive windscreens, and perhaps your balance sheet can't carry that. But that's an example. So insurance is expensive. Now the price is determined by insurers looking at your losses. So they would traditionally ask for 3 years loss ratios, claims experience, and they would analyze it, and they would then project it into the next year. They would add on inflationary increases and anything else that they'd like to bring in, determine what they need to cover claims, and then add on their admin cost, profit, broker commission, and generally charge you 40% more, depending on what type of profit they want to make. So they would look, so that word loss ratio, and I mean, those of you, I'm sure you do know, a loss ratio is a percentage of your claims expressed as a percentage of the premium that you're paying. So that's how an insurer, they want to make 60% because that gives them some profit, not great, but some profit. The lower the loss ratio, obviously, the more stable your premiums are going to be and the lower your premiums are going to be. And this is what we're aiming for. We're aiming to try and bring down your insurance payaway and the overall cost of your risk and insurance. Now, less claims and lower average cost of claims, and that's really frequency and your severity, will affect your loss ratio. And that's what I'm going to deal with in the last slide, the good news slide, if I can call it that, and have a look at how we can bring down our loss ratio and be in a position of strength with the insurer. Trust me, guys, if your loss ratios are anywhere between 60 and 100%, you have got absolutely, or you've got very little standing to fight with the insurers when it comes to renewal. It is a hard market. They employing knee-jerk reactions. They're having midterm increases. They're increasing excesses, and it really is quite tough out there. So I would rather try and approach it from the positive and try and control your loss ratio so that you're in control of your negotiations with the insurer. All right, let's have a look how we can and what we need to look at. And guys, in 15 minutes, you must understand we can't go into a lot of detail here. As I said to you, there's frequency and severity. Avoiding the incident will bring down the frequency. So I've always said, as a broker, I'd rather be known as a broker that avoided the claim in the first place than paid the claim well. So rather try and institute risk management interventions that allow you to identify that a claim is going to happen. The risk management interventions are very well known: driver behavior, driver wellness, maintenance of your vehicles, and of course, overloading. And those of you that have walked the familiar RTMS path with me will know that those are the 4 pillars of RTMS. So if you're keen on improving your risk management, you don't have to go much further than SANS 1395 and look at how to comply with what they speak about in that national standard. And the availability and analysis of claims information is terribly important when it comes to decision making. In other words, where are things going wrong? If you don't have that information, you can't fix it. So that's how we approach trying to bring down the frequency of claims. Reducing the average cost of claim is also important. If you can somehow have a claims system that allows you to take control of your procurement process, your supply chain process, in other words, your windscreen repairers, if you are insuring windscreens, just basically your repairers, your parts providers, your tow truck operators, your third-party recovery agents, all those things can be dealt with properly in a claims scenario or a claims process. And if it's done properly, it brings down your average cost of claims. And then find ways to self-insure. People might hesitate to and feel awkward when one speaks of self-insurance, but you don't have to be. It is a way, even if you have increased. Excuse? Oh. Sorry. Even if you increase your co-payment, your excess, your first amount payable, that is already going in a right direction. You do get more sophisticated structures, aggregate excesses. I'll mention a few of those later. But certainly, if your risk management is in place, you can then have a look at increasing your self-insurance exposure. Efficient third-party recoveries is a very undersold area. If people cause the damage to your vehicles, you really need ruthless and fast action to get that recovered, and again, to bring down your average cost of your claim. And then the 2 last items there is make sure you select the correct insurer. There are insurers there that are more out in the market that are more comfortable with certain risks. There's certain insurers that don't like overland transporters, etc., etc. Was there another
To our
question?
colleagues online, sorry about that. We were load shed interrupted. I believe Harry's almost got you back on. The sound is almost back, Dr. Nora. I see you and I hear you and I raise you. So we're back live.
Thank you, Basil. I'm just about at the end of my presentation. Those of you that missed it, there were just 2 points that we addressed there in a way to reduce your insurance costs and make sure you've got the right insurer on your side, and to ask your broker whether, in fact, your policy is structured in the most favorable way. Some of the other ways, if I stick to the structure for a minute, insurers are prepared to look at arrangements like, I'm not allowed to use the word profit share. That is a no-no, but I can call it a fund where a portion of the premium that you're paying the insurer gets put into a fund by the insurer. And if your loss ratio, going back to our new buzzword, if your loss ratio is less than 60% of the claims premium, then you get your full fund back again. Once it goes over the 60%, they pull from the fund to top it up, to keep it at 60%, and whatever's left in there at the end of the year is yours. So that is at least an incentive to encourage operators to apply risk management, to train their drivers, to test their drivers, et cetera, and hopefully show a good loss ratio. So there are other means of saving on your insurance premium. And guys, that's about it from me. Concluding, the question that I want you to, are you minimizing the cost of your insurance payaway by maximizing the impact of an effective risk and insurance program? And I say risk because it does include your risk management interventions. And guys, I hope I've given some of you some food for thought that you can take back to your businesses. Those of you out there that are not having your little siesta this afternoon, I hope you've learned something. Thank you, Basil, again for the invitation, and Harry, thanks for facilitating.
Thank you, Steve. I think you'll get a little bit more insight tomorrow when the actual discussion around the threats and disruptions come across, and our perceived and intended plans of action together with SAPS. Eleanor, we apologize. We know you've been online and then kicked out, and but we're about to get to you whilst Harry comes around setting that up. I'm just going to deal with a query that was raised from CTRAC Fleet Management Solutions, broadly stating, in terms of cost management, risk management and efficiency, what is SABOA doing in terms of fleet management solutions on telematics? And what is SABOA doing around the safety of passengers and all users of their fleet in absence of camera solutions? And I think the rest of it kind of flows through. The proposal is from CTRAC that they have solutions. Simple answer. SABOA is really constituted around membership and service offering, but the association doesn't decree one solution over the other. It's an equal playing field, and all associate partners get equal opportunity to pitch their products and service offerings to our membership. It really comes down to individual operators and their preference. But CTRAC, you're welcome to resurrect your membership with SABOA, which then gives you open platform at all of our forums and more integrated participation. I know you're very integrally connected with Transport Forum, but we can build on that. Certainly, yes, your service offering is ideal in most cases, but it's really an individual operator owner entity choice. SABOA promotes broadly safety and all systems that contribute to safety and security. The telematic system is one of them, and we will go with that. Okay. right, back to the program at hand. So colleagues, it came through in a couple of the presentations today, and much is being written and spoken about not only the global trends, but also South Africa's position in the transition to alternative energy vehicles, and the electric vehicle space in particular. Whether we like it or not, this is going to have an obvious long-term impact on the bus and coach public transport sectors. Whilst I personally believe we're still a far way away from implementation, we were going to have the chief director here today, Themba Tenza, but he got delayed. Not that he was going to speak, but I think on the 9th of November, he outlined a broad framework for his department in the transition to green energy. But there's still more questions than answers at this stage, and there's still a great deal of unknown. So it is up to the industry to also be active and alert to what is happening. So on the program today, one entity that is actively canvassing and looking to partner with applicable sectors and entities is Project Rainbow. And here online to tell us more and leading the Project Rainbow team is Eleanor Kricha. A little bit about Eleanor. She's a consultant in the hydrogen team at Element Energy, which is a low carbon energy consultancy. Eleanor's work specifically is focused on hydrogen mobility and fuel cell electric vehicles, and her team has been involved in several first-of-a-kind deployment projects. Element Energy bring their hydrogen expertise to the Rainbow project with the intention of kickstarting a hydrogen mobility ecosystem in South Africa. Within this project, Element Energy acts as a secretariat to the Rainbow consortium, which is made up of key players in the hydrogen industry, including Anglo American, Bambili Energy, ENGIE, Cecil, and Total Energies. So thank you, Eleanor, for being patient, and I'm sure you and to the team as well. And I'm sure that this will raise quite a discussion as well. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Basil.
Over to you.
Am I okay to just share my screen?
Just give us a chance to align the sound, but we see you nice and bright on the screen. Thank you.
Perfect. I'm just putting some slides up now. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. Great. So thank you very much for having me here today. It's a really great opportunity to speak to you all about this Project Rainbow that we've been working on, and hopefully we can provide a bit of an introduction to hydrogen mobility as part of this talk. So I'll just begin by giving a quick introduction to hydrogen mobility. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this already, but for those of you who are not, there's sort of two different ways that hydrogen can be used as a fuel for vehicles. So the focus of our project is around fuel cell vehicles. So these operate in a similar way to electric vehicles. You have a tank which you fill with compressed hydrogen gas, and this then reacts with oxygen that comes in through the air in the fuel cell stack to generate an electric current. And another technology that you can use is just a hydrogen combustion engine. So this is in a similar way to a diesel vehicle, but you'd require some sort of retrofitting of the engine. There's various benefits to each of these technologies. The fuel cell has the advantage of being a more efficient technology, and with sort of no emissions. The only emissions are water vapor, whereas the combustion engine does generate some combustion emissions. However, the sort of challenge with the fuel cell technology is the expense of the vehicle, as it's a relatively new technology. So you might be wondering why we're interested in using hydrogen as a fuel. So I'll just run through some of the sort of key value propositions of using hydrogen as a fuel for transport. So the first point is that it can match the duty cycle of fossil equivalents. So this means that when you transition your fleet from diesel to a low carbon hydrogen bus, it can achieve the same range as the fossil equivalent and also have a really short refueling time. So, up to 15 minutes maximum. So there's minimal downtime of your vehicle. I think the second key point is that it's an ultra low carbon technology. So although hydrogen can be produced in a number of different ways, some of them that are not zero emission, the focus of our project would be around green hydrogen, which is produced using renewable electrolysis, and it has almost zero carbon footprint. Furthermore, this really helps to improve the local air quality. So not only is the fuel that you put in doesn't create any carbon from generating the fuel, the only emission from the vehicle itself is water vapor. And most of the vehicles also have an air filter, which actually actively reduces the particulate pollution in the area to help improve local air quality. And then I think the final point is really around sort of fuel dependence. So being able to produce your hydrogen locally means that you're not relying on importing fossil fuels. So you're not reliant on other countries for your fuel security. And also we hope that the hydrogen industry can help to sort of create economic growth in South Africa and also create new jobs in the sort of vehicle manufacturing and engineering industries. So just a few more details around the vehicles itself. So I guess another advantage of fuel cell technologies is that they're able to fulfill some criteria that battery electric vehicles are not able to. So some of the sort of key advantages of a fuel cell vehicle, as mentioned before, it's this long range requirement. So I guess particularly for a bus operator, if you're operating on a long route, a hillier route, maybe it's going between a rural area and the city, and there's not able to be much downtime to charge your vehicle, that's where a fuel cell bus might be particularly beneficial. Some other points around sort of electricity grid supply constraints. So if you've got a large fleet of buses and you were going to convert them to battery electric, you'd have to probably do some quite significant grid upgrades at your depot. These can be quite high cost and also have long lead times, which can sort of be another barrier to battery electric vehicles. And another point is around sort of the load of the vehicle. So hydrogen's a lightweight fuel, and this means that you're able to maximize the payload of the vehicle. And this is potentially more of a benefit for sort of logistics operators, but in the bus context, this means that you're not having to minimize the number of passengers that you can carry. You're not sort of, I guess, compromising on your profit of your operations. And the final point is around additional power takeoff. So given that the hydrogen fuel cell vehicles have quite a large range, the vehicles are quite powerful, this means it's easy to carry out other additional operations on the vehicle. So not necessarily so relevant for buses, but things like power tool use or food refrigeration can be carried out in these vehicles. Or in the bus context, I suppose, heating and cooling of the vehicle is not a problem and won't particularly limit the range of the vehicle. So in terms of sort of the progress in the hydrogen industry today, I just thought I'd give a bit of a quick overview about what's going on globally. So as of 2021, there are around 228 hydrogen projects around the world. So a lot of progress has been made in the sector already. And you can see from that graph on the right-hand side that production is expected to increase out to 2030. So we are expecting the sector to kind of keep expanding. So you might be wondering, sounds like a really great alternative, but why have I not seen more of these vehicles on the road today? I guess one of the major barriers is the cost of these vehicles. So since the technology is not fully mature yet and it's only being manufactured at small scales, this leads to high capital costs of the vehicles. And similarly, a lot of the production plants are not large scale yet, which sort of increases the cost of the hydrogen. And you can see from this graph here that today, this example is for a truck, but it would apply in a similar way for a bus, that the total cost of ownership of a hydrogen bus is significantly greater than diesel bus today. But we see that over the coming years, as we approach 2030, we can expect that those costs will come down as the scale of manufacturing increases. And also, I guess another point is around kind of policy interventions. So we expect that some policy will come in to support these zero emission vehicles, or equally sort of negatively impact diesel vehicles. So I guess things like low emission zones, things like this that will provide support for hydrogen. And yeah, I think similarly, in terms of the sort of scale point, there's kind of two major advantages to this. So the first is that it'll help to bring the costs down. So you can see from this graph that as the scale increases, the cost that you're paying for your hydrogen will decrease. So this is the scale of the station. So how much hydrogen can be dispensed per day. So if you have a larger scale station, which is well utilized, that will really help to bring the cost down. And I think the second point is around reliability. If you can deploy larger stations, you can have some kind of level of inbuilt redundancy. So for example, multiple dispensing units. And this means that the station can always be used and there's no issues with downtime. So a bit more now about the kind of specifics of Project Rainbow, which is what we've been working on in South Africa. So the project was initially born out of the South African Hydrogen Valley final report. This was published in October 2021. And a number of the sort of existing steering committee members were involved in publishing this report. So Anglo American, Bambili Energy and NG. And this report kind of evaluated the benefits of hydrogen to South Africa, some of which included sort of creating new jobs, which obviously is important in the sort of unemployment context of South Africa, monetizing the existing sort of platinum and mining industry that you have in South Africa. Importantly, obviously contributing to the climate objectives. So by introducing this clean fuel, which can be used in transport, will really help to curb some of the transport and industry related emissions. And also, given that the cost of renewables is quite a lot cheaper in South Africa, this means that you can create hydrogen more cheaply and could potentially export this fuel to other countries. And another sort of key finding of the report was identifying key locations for the initial hydrogen hubs. So the three locations that were identified were Johannesburg, Durban, and Mogalakwena, based on sort of industry expertise that was already there, and in the case of Durban, sort of potential export from the port area. So I'll talk a bit more in detail now about what we're actually trying to do with this project. So the end goal is to have a freight corridor that runs between Johannesburg and Durban, so heavier duty kind of trucks, coaches. But in the initial phases, what we're looking to do is start off with a bus project, and that will be located in Johannesburg. So as you can see here, looking to do around 20 buses and 10 rigid trucks, which would operate from a single station in Johannesburg. And the choice of Johannesburg came about because at Mogalakwena, Anglo American have their mine where they're already generating green hydrogen. The idea was to basically tanker that hydrogen into Johannesburg for use of vehicles in the city. And then as the project expands, we're looking to replicate that hub in Durban. So we'd look to deploy another 30 buses and 40 rigid trucks. And we'd also be looking to secure some additional hydrogen supply for the later phases. And then, as I mentioned, the end goal is to sort of expand those city-based hubs, so increase the number of buses and inner city trucks, and also have this freight corridor with sort of 4 stations along the route with coaches and articulated trucks. You might be wondering why we haven't just gone straight in for the trucks, sort of related to the state of the market at the moment. So fuel cell trucks are not sort of readily available. You couldn't sort of get one in South Africa very easily today, or at least not a fleet of hundreds of vehicles, whereas fuel cell buses are a much more advanced technology. We've already seen sort of hundreds or thousands of buses being deployed in Europe successfully, and operators sort of giving positive feedback. So we see this as an easier thing to be able to replicate in South Africa, given that the technology has already been proven. So a bit more about the actual consortium involved in the project. So as I mentioned, the steering committee is made up of 5 South African hydrogen industry players. So that's Anglo American, NG, Bambili Energy, Total Energies and Sasol. And we, as Element Energy, who are part of the wider ERM group, act as the project secretariat. So our role is involved in sort of coordinating meetings between the steering committee members, and also organising external events and meetings, particularly with government bodies, financial bodies, and also engaging with the bus and truck operators and OEMs. I think it's also worth mentioning that part of the project is focusing around kind of localization of the manufacturing. So we're trying to meet with many sort of vehicle assemblers and bodybuilders based in South Africa who could do the sort of final assembly of the buses and trucks in South Africa. So just a quick update on the actual project progress and where we are today. So on the vehicle supply side of things, we've released an RFI to both bus and truck vehicle suppliers, and we've been able to down select 3 potential bus suppliers for the project. And the next phase will be to sort of select 1 bus partner for the first phase, and also continue our engagements with truck suppliers, as we haven't yet been able to find anyone willing to supply the trucks for the later phases. In terms of the hydrogen supply, we've issued an RFI internally to the steering committee. As you might have seen, a number of the members are already able to contribute to the production, distribution and dispensing of hydrogen. That's sort of their key sort of role. So we're just going to be doing the RFI internally, and hopefully we'll receive some proposals in the coming weeks. And over the coming months, we'll then select the hydrogen supply partner for the project. In terms of operators, we have been engaging with a number of operators, predominantly in Johannesburg and Durban, but we'd be really interested to hear from any other operators present today who might be interested in being involved, or know of other parties that might be interested in trialling some of these vehicles. And the long-term goal is to then establish sort of bus and truck operator groups. These groups would meet regularly and sort of provide strategic input to the project. So it wouldn't just be us leading it. We would, we want to speak to the people that are going to be on the ground and understand your experiences and how it would be best to execute the project. And then the final point is around the funding bodies. So we are been engaging with a number of different financing bodies, and for one particular fund, we are on the short list to receive 200 million euros of funding, and we're still waiting to hear back about that one, but we will be continuing to engage with funding bodies to secure funding for the first phase of the project. So, it's moving in a really good direction, and we're really keen to continue meeting with operators, OEMs based in South Africa to hear about your experiences and get any input on the project from you. So thank you very much for listening, and please reach out to me at the email address on the screen if you have any further questions or would like to organise a meeting.
Thank you, Eleanor. Are you staying on just to take any queries or questions? I've got a couple of things that have come through. 100%. Just as a start, the Hydrogen Valley study report, can you make that accessible, or where can the colleagues find it?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to share the link on the chat if that would be helpful.
And is that okay if we onward share that link?
Yeah, of course.
From a mass communication, 100%. Whilst you're doing that, one of the key things that came out there was the gap emanating from the policy and funding intervention. And then I think later down, you've said you down to the short list or in the range for a 200 million rand funding process. I'm asking the question on behalf of everybody, is that 200 million specifically going to be directed towards SA and SA infrastructure projects, or is it from a global perspective, if you are successful?
Yeah, no, it would just be, so I think the whole fund is 200 million, but it would be potentially split between a couple of projects. But my understanding is that it's been just our project that's fit into it. So whatever portion we would get would be directed at this hydrogen ecosystem just in South Africa. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else has any questions or clarity? Okay. Online? Anything online? Nothing? Okay, this is giving me grief, so I'm going to just go through it. All right, colleagues, this is the part where we would have had a panel discussion. Thank you, Eleanor, once again for your thing. I'm sure you'll get through your contact details, some reach out from individual entities or operators to get more information. And we'll continue to engage, and anything that comes up, you can pass on to us for the industry.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Harry. So I think we're back. Cheers, Eleanor. I think, colleagues, then that would have given us a chance for a panel discussion at this point, and there's no need, unless we haven't covered anything that anybody has had to ask in that process. You've just had lunch, so I think you're still fresh. I'm not going to give you another tea and coffee break, but we're democratic. I was a dictator in my previous life, and I'm still paying the price for that. Do you want a break? Quickly, whilst Gerard, you need 5 minutes to gather yourself, right? 5 minutes. Where are we time-wise? Whilst our facilitator gets us ready for a summation, it is 14:34. We'll be back at 1:45 if you want to do a stretch and a couple of phone calls. Thanks, folks. Hey, you know the graveyard shift. Oh. Hi. Yeah.
There's 1 or 2. Right, people on Zoom, we're just taking a break, 5 minutes. Get back to you in a second. Thank you.
Testing, testing. Testing, Harry. Testing, testing. Testing, 1, 2, 3, Harry. Okay. Basil, can we start? I think it's the microphone. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, everybody outside, come in. We're going to conclude today with a bit of a summary of what happened during the day today. So if everybody can come in. Rika, do you know where there's people outside still? Precious? Okay. Shall I start? Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, and all our viewers, shall we call it that? Okay. Okay. Okay, now can you just start? Okay, a very famous orator once said that to do a 1 hour speech, he can do off the cuff. 1 hour speech. To do a 5-minute speech will take him 2 days to prepare. To still communicate the essence. And so this is my challenge, is to summarize what happened today. But let me just give it a little bit of context. What are we here for? I mean, this is a strategic conference where the strategy of the association, SABOA, is actually being reviewed and considered in terms of what, as an association, should be done given all the discussions that were had today. Okay, Harry, can I have the presentation on, please? Okay, so a normal strategic planning session normally follows this type of, there's many ways, but this is one. To develop a vision and mission statement. SABOA has, I think, through the years done that. I've been through it and it's very solid in terms of what the association stands for. So we're not going to spend any time on this in this specific session. Then normally there's an external environment analysis. And I think that's basically what happened today. We've had inputs from people that are very knowledgeable, people that are very influential in terms of stating what the situation, the external situation to this industry is, and for which SABOA must align itself with a strategy to support. So the external environment. Internal, that is specifically then the organization of SABOA, Basil and his team, and what they have at their disposal to deliver that service to the members. And we're not going to spend today any time on that. I think our focus is going to be the external environment, and tomorrow we're going to actually talk about and generate and evaluate and choose strategies. Basically 5 different types, or 6, whatever is the outcome. We're going to prepare and present to the meeting tomorrow options that we then would have the members' guidance in terms of what should be taken forward by the SABOA management. So I think that sort of sets the scene. In terms of the summary of inputs, and yeah, this is my humble summary of actually what happened today, but I think those would be then typically the inputs in the discussion that we had. Firstly, one of the things that came out to me as a a new member of your industry, and sometimes that's maybe a good thing, because you look with fresh eyes and different eyes to the same problem, at the same problem. So the contracts and ending and renewal, there's what I gauge a lot of uncertainty, and what was presented by the Deputy Director General is that he started off saying there is no good news. And my take on it is that if I were sitting in your seats, I think it's business as usual. I think with what the things that you're busy with at the moment is going to continue. And that means hard negotiations in terms of the time that's lying ahead. So the industry will either have to be very creative in terms of establishing itself and to make sure that the viability, given the uncertainty, which clearly is still prevalent. And advice that I can give you, humble advice, is to really look at win-win and not lose-lose situations. And sometimes it is hard to get bad news, and it's hard to see and stomach inefficiency or let's say different views on the same problem. I think from an industry point of view, and I think that's where the association must play a role, is to ensure that win-win situations will come out of deliberations and the relationships going forward. The second point that I saw was the feedback on the transformation and transition, as you call it, and that employment equity is obviously often a emotional legacy which South African business has to face. And I think I've been taught very early in my career by a mentor that said to me, never make an emotional business decision. You're going to lose a lot of money. So I would encourage you not to be emotional, but to be very pragmatic in terms of how you would be dealing with the transformation. I think that the reality was that what was presented today was basically law that has not been signed yet. But there are laws in place, obviously, which already takes a lot of time. I facilitated the company. I was reminded again to get them a BEE level 2 accreditation. They're in the mining industry. And for a small company, they employ about 100 people. So they just above the 50, and they had to go to through the Empowerdex evaluation. And for a small company to just do the administration that's required to eventually get it's a lot of work. You basically need people full-time on it, and if you're a small company, that's not always that easy, and it could be very, very distracting. So it is always very emotional, but my point of view is that one should not take emotional decisions around, rather engage and try and be proactive in terms of what the legislation. And what I did hear the speaker say was that there is areas where basically one can actually, because the practical reality of implementing employment equity is that you put out a job and you only have the wrong people applying for the job because it requires a specific skill or a specific level of, so it's not easy. But then to engage and actually develop and look at succession in one's business in the longer term as well. So I think that's something that needs to be taken on board out of this discussions today. Then the economic conditions, fuel prices. So the economic overview was more positive than I expected. But, and I think there's a big but, we've seen in 2020 how quickly any economic forecast can go south for whatever reason. And I think in South Africa particularly, even though we're part of a global economy and the global economy determines to a large extent our economic activity, we have the challenges of a very fragile power system and diesel prices that are extremely high. In other words, energy prices, commodity prices that are extremely high. And the forecast said that things are basically going to move sideways, and it's moving sideways from quite a high level. So it's something that that one will have to consider and be aware of. And often, I think where an association can play a role is to really be also the source of information to members in this space. So I think there's electric vehicles or hydrogen cell is something that's definitely coming. I think the best way to actually get out of it and stay entrepreneurial is to understand the technologies that one can utilize to solve problems. And I think that's one of the human characteristics that we have. We can make a plan. We can be extremely creative, and I think we must not underestimate what technology answers can bring to today's problems. Then we had the discussion about the insurance. I think that's often, as was said, a grudge buy in our budgets. But I think what the message that I got from the speaker was that one must really also manage the risk in your business. So there's things proactively that one can be doing in the transport business that can actually manage your insurance cost. And obviously, as a member association, the fact that you have a critical mass that you represent also gives you the ability to negotiate or do things jointly that can manage those costs in your business. Okay. So one of the things that I picked up, the slow growth of the business operators industry. So points 1 to 3 above that we've discussed, obviously, as an input in that. But the policy and legal uncertainty is something that I think we all understand, that creates an unwillingness to invest. I think that doesn't make your industry unique. I think that's a general situation in South Africa. I've heard a speaker saying that you know, as much as government is trying to get people from overseas to invest in South Africa, South Africans actually, we have investment money of our own. But the same reason as overseas investors not wanting to invest, local investors are also scared to invest. And I think that's something as an association that one can play a role in explaining and debating that. So one thing that I've picked up is that to be dependent on laws for profitability is always a very it's a high risk in your business to be dependent on laws, because laws can literally change tomorrow. We see that in the times of the decentralized industrial developments in South Africa, how quickly, even though a lot of people bought into it, participated in it today, those areas are only there because of fundamental financial reasons. People getting low rentals or whatever in those buildings that were created at the time. But a lot of people, when the laws changed, lost a lot of money because they built their businesses on incentives and things like that. So one must be very careful of that. So the question that I would ask the industry is, how can one structure the industry to become less reliant on the legal situation to be profitable? That's a question. I don't have the answer to that, but I'm sure the people sitting in front of me can be asked that question and start becoming creative and by discussing the issue. I think what was very valuable, Basil, was the discussion with regards, and I think this is the strategy that we want to formulate, is the surviving as an association discussion that Peter gave us, which was I think very on point, and will have I think a very good input into the discussion tomorrow. So there was very valuable input, and I think there's some self-reflection. I think the points that he put on in his presentation is something that we as an association can also look at and say, how are we doing on really knowing our members, knowing the industry, and what are the value that we're offering. And I'm not saying it's not happening, but it's really something that we need to measure ourselves on. I think everybody sitting in front of me will know the adage that says, if we can measure it, we can do something about it. So if we don't measure it, you can't manage it. So it's just a point of saying, but how can we measure ourselves on some of the points that Peter has put up? And I think my point C there, I think as an association, and from what I've seen in terms of Basil, is also to really want to leave a legacy as an association. That it's not just obviously people gather around because of personal or your own company interest, but also to have an element of leaving a legacy as an association, so that you can muster more members into the. I mean, that's one of the most important marketing points these days. If you can leave a legacy, if there's people see through an ulterior motive very quickly in marketing. So companies are focusing on what are we doing to really leave a legacy in what we do. And then lastly, the technology discussion, I think is very interesting, and but the reality of what we saw is that it's long term. It's very exciting technology if it could, but I think most of us sitting here say, but I need to run my business 2023, 2024. I've got budgets, I've got targets to make, and that's unfortunately not yet available. But it's something to keep your eye on, because there's also there's the discussion, hydrogen fuel vehicles or electric vehicles. I know from my experience, there's already in Europe, for instance, in the agricultural space, there's small electric tractors that farmers are starting to use, and it's something to keep your eye on, because the whole energy discussion worldwide in many industries are busy changing. Farmers want to become independent from diesel because it's such a high input cost into their businesses, and so if they can replace that, and farmers would definitely, they've got the space to put up their own electricity power generation on the farms that they have. I think in the future you will see farmers having electric vehicles, and they power themselves during the day, whatever the case might be. So it is definitely something to look at, but I think the issue is that one needs to be informed, keep up to date. But the focus, I think, for the next 2 to 3 years that we're discussing strategy, that's not yet going to be something that you can actually make use of. So what I've done, and I will start with this tomorrow, I've taken the liberty in our strategic process to do a bit of a SWOT analysis, and that will then play into deciding in terms of what are the key strategic thrusts that the association should keep itself busy with. I'm not going to go through that now. I want to actually start tomorrow. discussing it over here. Are there any questions about the process? Any ideas? Any thoughts that can be added at this stage would be very helpful.
Thanks, Gerard. I think the only thing, because the focus hasn't been centered around it, once the Colonel does his presentation tomorrow, one of the core things that will come out is broadly safety, security, and threat. It's not there yet, so we'll dovetail that with the presentation from the Colonel from SAPS tomorrow, and then the industry input. But it's certainly on the table to add to that. But I think that summarizes quite well what happens. There's some good deliverables that we have in mind already that will come out that may take care of quite a few of those in terms of positioning it. But yeah, let's hear. Anybody? Any input online? I'm not sure, Harry, if anybody online has comments. No? To the 23 people online, thank you for staying with us all the way. President?
With the Colonel's presentation tomorrow, will that impact your summary so far? And if it does, will it then impact the way forward?
Yeah, I think it's an important input that we missed out on today, and clearly we need to hear that. But I think it won't change any of this, but it will definitely add and maybe change some priorities in terms of strategies that we need to be actively supporting, and obviously funding, because that's I think the ultimate part of it. No effort is without the little bit of money behind it. So I think it's a matter of strategic priorities, and that will be an important input.
How we respond as an industry? How we respond as an industry to those critical issues affecting Colonel Boyson?
Thanks, Gerard. I think that, but you may stay there. I think it's probably both prudent and practical now for us to get, I was going to say doyen of the industry, but the brains trust that has been with SABOA for many a decade, Professor Walters. I think some of it you might hear will be a slight duplication of what we've covered today, but I think Prof. Walters has been integral in many a strategy session for the industry, and his comments are listened to very closely by the departments, and they also shape some of the department's thinking. So, Prof, on the spot kind of thing, but would you mind doing us a favor and giving us your take and maybe a high-level summary from your perspective? Thanks, Prof. Yeah, if you want to.
Thank you, Basil, for putting me on the spot. So yes, I've made a few notes about this morning sessions, and also knowing the industry and talking to colleagues. So there will be some overlap in terms of what we've heard that Gerard has just summarized and what we heard this morning. But I thought I've got a list here of things I think we should pay attention to, and that will affect the industry and is affecting the industry, I think. And in no particular order of importance, I've just written them down as Gerard was speaking. I think one of the burning questions for especially the operators operating through the public transport operations grant is uncertainty. Although we have a 3-year view going ahead, last year there was a negative increase, this year's 5.7, but all the operators had to face this cash flow of last year. Look at the fuel cost, labor cost, and so on. So that's been a real knock on the chin for the industry. So that's been hugely problematic, the negative increase in the PTOG. Against the cost pressures of interest rates, we've seen what interest rates have done this year, and that obviously will have a knock-on effect on replacement programs. The fuel cost, I've just looked at what Thijs mentioned to me now, the fuel cost has doubled between 2020 and end of 2022. Now, that's about 40% of your operating costs, and that's straight cash flow. It's a huge issue. Our labor costs, we know what our labor costs are. It's also around 35–40%, and labor is not amenable to the bend the knee and say, yes, for the sake of the industry, we'd like to not accept, we will accept an increase that's more just below inflation. So that's problematic. We see it in this year's negotiations as well. Then obviously the Rand dollar exchange has had a huge impact, similar to the Rand euro, where we import our stuff from, our engines, gearboxes, electronics, and so on. So that's against the PTOG of last year. It's really been a disastrous year, coupled to the fact that the economy is still not working and we are still down on passengers within the industry as well. I know the airline industry is only operating locally at about 75% of what they used to operate in 2019. I suspect if I look at our industry, it's around 80%, 82% around there. So you have your capacity to deal with 29 load factors, but you can't realize them. I think the other area, the second one, is contract uncertainty. We've heard it this morning. No news, So no news is actually very bad news. It's not good news. It's bad news that there's nothing going on. And that's what's going on. There's so much uncertainty about that. And Matabata mentioned, that in Gauteng, they're optimistic that they'll be able to negotiate these contracts the next 2 months, as complex as they are in the next 2 months, dealing with the increases, the right sizing of the business, the fitting of the PTOG grants, the 30% set aside. All of those things must be negotiated in the next 2 months. It's not going to work. So you're looking at an extension of these contracts under the current given circumstances, which is not right, especially if you look at the escalation clause that we have that's not being dealt with in the tendered contracts or the negotiated contracts. And those escalation clauses, were fixed in 1997, when the diesel was still 10.2% of overall costs. Look where it's now. So not that they are paying attention to the escalation clause because they can't afford it. They're not making provision for that top up on the provisional grant as the Treasury gives us. So this whole uncertainty about negotiated contracts, tendered contracts, the capacity of the state, he mentioned that, to actually implement this is very problematic. And aren't we too optimistic about the ideal policy being implemented, but we don't have the skills and the ability and the funding to actually give effect to the policy? So that's the second one. Intimidation and violence is a big issue. We know what's happening, what happened with Intercape. We had to go back and force the minister to respond. Now there's protection for the company, but you have to go through the court system to force the minister to do his work. This is not the right thing to do. But I think the fact that there's now protection and they can claim against the police services is a lesson for our industry, and we should all do that. Start forcing the government to do its work against violence and intimidation. And we know it's a big issue in our industry. It pushes up our insurance costs because you lose vehicles, damage to vehicles. You heard about the insurance costs. Pushes up our cost structure in the industry, to operate in those areas. And we lose capacity because of burned buses, broken down buses, and so on. I think we cannot do much about. The economy is in the doldrums, and the forecasts for the next 4 years is a very low growth scenario. Unless we can sort out the electricity issues in the country, we're looking at a very low growth scenario. For us, it's not good because people won't be employed, they won't need to be transported, and we're facing maybe further declines in our passenger numbers, or all the same levels as what we have now, but rising costs. So this is not good for us. We have to look at green energy, but we don't see much movement around the green energy policy and approach because there's no movement in the contracts. The work that's being done in the industry around green energy, battery buses is being done in Golden Arrow out of their own pocket, their own initiative. But certainly, if you look at these renegotiations of these contracts, it should form part of it. It should not be something else there, like a silo approach. So it's really important that if you look at COP26 now, our promises in COP26 as a country, we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And I know hydrogen was mentioned just now, but it's more for long distance buses, not for short distance, but battery electric buses, certainly. I was in Australia in September, and the operators there tell me a battery electric bus is a no-brainer. We have the electricity is much cheaper than the diesel, much cheaper to maintain, and they can easily cover their shifts with a battery electric bus. You don't have to charge it during the day. I know we have longer routes than what they have there, but even in a place like Singapore, they can operate a battery electric bus with air conditioning running over the whole day. And there they run 18 hours per day. They can still do that. So it's the one area I think we should really also focus on, is how do we get the government to start working on this and specifying this type of technology and lower our cost of operations. Fleet replacement, I think, is a problem. I think we all know that our buses are getting older, and because they're getting older, they require more maintenance. Because they have more maintenance, they're more off the road, so your bus availability drops, and the cost of maintaining your service increases, but at the same time, reliability decreases as well due to breakdown. So fleet replacement, I think, is really very important for us. It's also important, I remember many years ago in Port Elizabeth, they had these old red buses. I don't know whether you can remember those London buses with a little nose in front. Yeah, the double-deckers. And I couldn't understand why the passengers, if they're getting a good service, were stoning the buses, and they just didn't like the bus. I did a survey, and the passengers said, we're sick and tired of these old red buses. They're noisy, they're bumpy, they're not attractive. We want new buses. Put new buses in, and the passenger volumes went up by 20 to 30%. So our passengers are very much aware of the condition of our buses, the age of our buses, how modern they are, and so on. So we have to start replacing our fleets like we used to every 10 years, that 10-year average cycle. We need to look at that. And at the moment, we cannot do that because there are no contracts coming out. I think the other issue is really the dominance of the taxi industry, and it's grown its market share, as we've shown. I think we've shared that with you over time. It's now responsible for 80% of all commuter trips. And if it carries on like this, we'll be a non-entity in the next 10 years as an industry. They've come from nowhere, as you know, in the 80s, and they've grown their market share. And because of this market share, they have the ear of government. And it's a favorite of government. And it's a Cinderella of government in a way, even though it gives them a lot of problems. It's a Cinderella industry for government. So we have a problem as far as that's concerned. It's also linked to this new subsidy policy. There's lots of pressure from the taxi industry to get subsidized. And Matabata mentioned this morning, we've commented on this extensively, this new proposed subsidy policy that's user-based. So the user will get the funding, and the user can choose which mode of transport she would like to use. And it spells huge issues going forward for this industry. It's also an approach that we have found nowhere else in the world in big services, a user-side subsidy basis. And but yet here, the consultants to the Department of Transport said, we must try something. But once you're on that road, it's very difficult to turn around and go back to where you were. So we've really told them, if you really persist in pushing through this policy, you must have areas where you can test the policy, see what it costs us, what systems do you have in place, how happy the passengers are, what the effect would be on existing modes of transport like bus, rail, and the taxi industry and so on. So that's something we have to watch out for. And when it goes through cabinet, probably come for general consultation in the general public. And we must make very sure that we give our inputs as far as that's concerned. Someone mentioned also that the work that this industry does, if you look at what's going on in PRASA, they've got 16 or 17,000 employees, yet they're transporting about 17 million people now per annum. They used to transport 880 million people, but all those people are still paid. They're still paid by the institution. there's little recognition of the work and the contribution that this industry makes in the as a stable force in the transportation of people in the country. And I think we'd like to see more recognition for the contribution the industry makes towards public transport in the country itself. SMME developments, I think as if I read Matabata correctly, they would throughout the country like to negotiate the existing contracts with existing operators, but also include the 30% set aside. And he said even more, but the government's policy is a 30% set aside on these contracts. I think there's a limit in terms of the size of the or the value of the contract is 30%. I don't think it's for every contract going up into the billions. But the point is that the 30% will help us to assist our smaller members also get a slice of the pie. So that will help a lot. And I think we should really focus as far as that's concerned on this thing. It's a positive development. I think the other area that's becoming more and more problematic, and we see it around us, is local authority services. The really massive deterioration in services we can expect from local authorities like road maintenance, electricity, water, sewage, and so on. And we know electricity is going up by about 19% as well, which is also quite an input in many of our businesses. So this is a given cost. We can do nothing about that. But it's an area I think that should concern us more and more. That at the national level, you can still live with some of the policies, but we all feel it in our businesses, in our households, because of the lack of services at the local authority level. The next one, I'm nearly finished, is government's indecision and frequent changes in key role players. There's no institutional memory in many of these places. We know when the elections take place, we have one coming up in 2024, you're probably going to see entire teams change again at the local, at the provincial level, and that's our contracting authority at this present time. And not too long after that, we have local government elections where many of our policies now reside and decisions reside, as Matabata also mentioned. So we've had, I think transport must have had the most number of ministers of transport of all the ministries of government at national level. We've had many DGs. Yeah. And you just build up a relationship and then they move on, or the minister moves on. Similarly, we have it at the MEC level, at the provincial level, and the head of department. Yeah, they've just moved the head of the department to Gauteng, Dr. Barkley, to somewhere else. At critical time, when they need to negotiate these bus contracts in the province. So there's no capacity to take this over. How do you deal with these things? So it's a major uncertainty. And then lastly, just the point that was mentioned earlier on today, the BEE, it's something we need to work on. We need to make sure that the industry is really represented and we give our inputs as far as this new policy is concerned. We'll see whether the president signs legislation, then we have another chance to give some inputs as far as that's concerned. So, Basil, that's my inputs. Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Don't run away. No, don't run away. Let's hear if anybody's got anything specific, a comment or question of clarity. And online, Harry, I'm not sure if anybody's got anything. Mr. Haynes?
Basil, I don't want to repeat a lot of things that's been said, during the course of the day and the summary that Jackie and our facilitator gave us. I think it is just worthwhile noting that the South African Road Passenger Bargaining Council did a research report, which they published about the state of our industry. And their findings were that 40% of the industry has been decimated over the last 2 to 3 years of the bus industry. That's not talking taxi industry, not freight, bus industry. 32 companies closed their doors in that period. About 7,000 employees were retrenched during that time. Now, that paints a picture of an industry that is in crisis at the moment.
And I think if we are blatantly honest with ourselves as well, we're having our conferences every year and we get government officials to come and talk to us and we discuss the same issues. It has been 26 years since the interim contracts were signed. It's approaching 3 decades. We've been talking about the same issues over and over again at our conferences. And I think the question that we must also ask ourselves tomorrow, is it time for us to do something different? Is there a different approach that is needed? We've recently tried to organize a bus in Durban with government as not only operators, but also the employer associations and labor. We've been unable to get a meeting, to get a date. We're writing letters to the department, which largely go unanswered, and we're not getting the correct reaction. Maybe we're naive in trying to expect a certain reaction, but the point I want to make is the problems that we're talking about has been in existence for a very long time, and we have not been able to resolve these issues. And I think as an industry, we've got to face up to that reality, and we've got to ask the question, is there something that we must do different from what we've done in the past? 40% of the industry lost in a matter of 2 to 3 years. That's a serious situation. So I think tomorrow it will be worthwhile just thinking about some of these issues.
Thank you, Thais. That's very, very sobering. But there you have it, industry and people online. The challenge has always been how to deal with the uncertainty and how to navigate the uncertainty. But I concur, it is definitely at an intersection to do something different. And that is up to tomorrow's discussion. It would be the same core issues, but what is the approach from the industry? And you may very well find comments arising that, but we've done that already. And we've spoken about that already. But that is the challenge of tomorrow. And Gerard, I think that's going to really put you at the cold face of discussions to harness and collate those issues. But we are facing, Jackie, immediately the same situation. New DG, new minister, who will plead ignorance and say, tell us about the story. Tell us of the last 3 decades, and we'd have to rehash that program again. So I think it's certainly time for us to take a view as to what is the alternative and how do we take that step to the alternatives. Thank you, Thais, for that. But sobering indeed.
Basil, I think the one thing that came out this morning is Matabata didn't have the answers. He didn't have the answers. He says after all these years, he knows they don't have the answers. So I don't know how. We probably have to engage government much more in depth and aggressively, I think, around this thing.
So that begs the question, how do we get them to the table? As I said, we've done individual responses, SAPAC, the industry, the operators jointly, and we've got no commitment. But yeah, let me drop it as a last. Shall we actually go to court to force them to talk to us? Shall we? Should we? It seems like we may have to, but the new minister and the new DG, I know, are being appraised of all the core issues. There are reports upon reports that are being fed through. Well, not the new minister, but the new DG. And hopefully by the time we get to the table, they will know how to respond to us. But thanks again. Thanks, Jackie, for that high-level summation. So, colleagues, in the absence of any other further comments, I think you've got the essence, you got the detail, you got the expert views on the different aspects and the different topics, and then you've got a very summarized view of what we're going to tackle tomorrow, and you've got almost some finite detail as to why we need to deal with that. And on that note, I think it's opportune to give you a time to break. Hopefully you're all joining us tomorrow, because tomorrow is the more core crux of the issue, and it is you as the industry to determine what cause, what rank, what priority, and give us your brief in terms of the core strategies, and then we'll unfold the deliverables. Thank you, everybody, for a lovely day and an interactive day, and travel safe and see you tomorrow.